Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to tonight's stream. I will be your host, Evan Blado Revan. Hope everybody's doing okay, and happy Halloween to everyone. Tonight we are doing something a little special because it is one of my favorite books of all time. We are reading The Halloween Tree by Ray Bradbury. It is the rough equivalent, basically, to I would say it's the rough equivalent to uh, like the Christmas Carol, just for Halloween. Just getting everything situated and ready to go. So, for those of you who aren't familiar with the way we do live readings on this channel, live and dramatic readings are done. Basically, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to read. I'm going to try and put on voices and do the whole shebang. As I'm doing that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go chapter by chapter. We're going to go through everything pretty much, and I'm basically going to stop every chapter to kind of take a breath and address you guys if you guys want to chat or anything like that. Feel free to chat as much as you want. Not going to be very much visual stuff going on, so if you want to get up, move away from the desk, put me on headphones or something like that, feel free. There's going to be very little like visual, but it's mostly going to be like live dramatic reading kind of stuff. Hey DC, how are you doing this thing? Let's see. And depending on how much we get done, depends on I may be doing another story tonight, but we'll see. Polling the audience of people I've read this to in the past, they say it generally takes me about 2 hours to get through the entire book. It's rather short. It is some reference on the Halloween tree. Let's see here. I can give you some reference on like what it is and all that kind of stuff. It was a fantasy novel that was written in 1972. Yeah, I bet DC. Basically, The Halloween Tree is a fantasy novel that was written by Ray Bradbury in 1972. That basically traces the history of Halloween throughout the ages using kind of basically what they knew at the time, as to histories and everything like that. So it's a little dated, but the way that the characters are described and the way everything happens in the story is very, very good. I enjoyed it. It was originally going to be hey Squishy. Originally, The Halloween Tree was going to be produced as an animated film with Chuck Jones. Chuck Jones did a lot of stuff like he did a lot of the. Thank you very much for the host there.
Or do not.
Squishy.
There is no try.
Basically, Chuck Jones was going to do a lot of is the guy who did How the Grinch Stole Christmas and several of those. But originally, he was going to do that's what the Halloween Tree was going to be. That fell through, and so Ray Bradbury then took it and wrote it into a novel. And in 1993, it was started as turned into a cartoon, a small feature-length cartoon. In 1993, that was narrated by Bradbury and had Leonard Nimoy as one of the main characters. It was very, very good. And so let's go ahead like what was it? Oh yeah, the script that was written for the adaptation won a won an Emmy in 1994, and if you can get your hands on it, it's pretty good. There are some minor changes to the actual story, to some of the characters and storyline that kind of updated it to the times. Because this book does feel a little dated, but at the same time, it's one of my favorite. Um, it's one of my favorite books of all time. So, no more mincing. Let's get right into it, shall we? The Halloween Tree by Ray Bradbury. Dedication. With love, Madame Mana Garot Dumbasil, met 27 years ago in the graveyard at midnight on the island of San Yanitzo at Lake Patscuro, Mexico, and remembered on each anniversary for the Day of the Dead. Chapter 1. It was a small town by a small river and a small lake in the small northern part of a Midwestern state. There wasn't so much wilderness around you as you couldn't see the town, but on the other hand, there wasn't so much town that you couldn't see, feel, and touch and smell the wilderness. The town was full of trees and dry grass and dead flowers now that autumn was here, and full of fences to walk on and sidewalks to skate on and a large ravine to tumble in and yell across. And the town was full of boys. And it was the afternoon of Halloween, and all the houses shut against a cool wind, and the town full of cold sunlight. But then suddenly, day was gone. Night came out, and under each tree it spread. Behind the doors of all of the houses there was a scurry of mouse feet, muted cries, flickerings of light. Behind one door, Tom Skelton, age 13, stopped and listened. The wind outside nestled in each tree, prowled the sidewalks in invisible threads like unseen cats. Tom Skelton shivered. Anyone could see that the wind was a special wind this night, and the darkness took on a special feel because it was All Hallows Eve. Everything seemed cut from soft black velvet or gold or orange. Smoke panted up out of 1,000 chimneys like the plumes of funeral parades. From kitchen windows drifted two pumpkin smells, gourds being cut and pies being baked. The cries behind the locked house doors grew more exasperated as the shadows of boys flew by windows. Half-dressed boys, grease paint on their cheeks, here a hunchback, there a medium-sized giant. Attics were still being rummaged, old locks broken, old steamer chests disemboweled for their costume. Tom Skelton put on his bones. He grinned at his spinal cord, the rib cage, the kneecaps, stitched white on black cotton. Lucky, he thought. What a name you've got, Tom Skelton. Great for Halloween. Everyone calls you Skeleton. So what do you wear? Bones. Wham! 8 front doors banged shut. 8 boys made a series of beautiful leaps over flower pots, rails, dead ferns, bushes, landing on their own dry, starched front lawns, galloping, rushing. They seized a final sheet, adjusted a last mask, tugged at some strange mushroom caps or wigs, shouting at the way the wind took them along, helped them running, glad of the wind, or cursing boy curses as masks fell off or hung sideways, or stuffed up their noses with a muslin smell like a dog's hot breath, or just letting out the sheer exhilaration of being alive and out on this night. Being out and alive on this night, and they let the wind pull at their lungs and shape their throats into a yell and a yell and a yell. 8 boys collided at one intersection. Here I am. Which? 8 men. Skeleton, said Tom, hilarious inside of his bones. Gargoyle. Beggar. Mr. Death himself. Bang, they shook back from their concussions, all happy-fowed, and tangled under street corner light. The swaying electric lamp belled in the wind like a cathedral bell. The bricks of the street became planks of a drunken ship, all tilted and floundered with dark and night. Behind each mask was a boy. Who's that? Tom Skelton pointed. Won't tell. Secret, cried Witch, disguising his voice. Everyone laughed. "Who's that? Mummy!" cried the boy inside an ancient yellow wrappings, like an immense cigar stalking the night streets. "And who's—" "No time!" said someone, hidden behind yet another mystery of muslin and paint. "Trick or treat!" "Yeah!" Shrieking, wailing, full of banshee mirth, they ran on everything except sidewalks, going up into the air over bushes and down almost upon yipping dogs. But in the middle of running, laughing, barking, suddenly, as if a great hand of night and wind and smelling something wrong stopped them, they stopped. 6, 7, 8? That can't be. Count again. 4, 5, 6. Should be 9 of us. Someone's missing. They sniffed each other like fearful beasts. Pipkin's not here. How did they know? They were all hidden behind masks, and yet they could feel his absence. Pipkin, he's never missed a Halloween in a zillion years. Boy, this is awful. Come on! In one vast swerve, one dog-like trot and ramble, they circled around and down the middle of the cobble brick street, brown like leaves before a storm. Here's his place. They pulled to a halt. There was Pipkin's house, but not enough pumpkins in the windows. Not enough corn shocks on the porch. Not enough spooks peering through the dark glass in the high upstairs tower room. Gosh, said someone. What if Pipkin's sick? It wouldn't be Halloween without Pipkin. Not Halloween, they moaned. And someone threw a crabapple at Pipkin's front door. It made a small thump like a rabbit kicking wood. They waited, sad for no reason, lost for no reason. They thought of Pipkin and Halloween, that there might be They thought of Pipkin and a Halloween that might be a rotten pumpkin with a dead candle if Pipkin wasn't there. Come on, Pipkin, come out and save the night. Chapter 2. Why were they waiting, afraid for one small boy? Because Joe Pipkin was the greatest boy who ever lived, the grandest boy who ever fell out of a tree and laughed at the joke, the finest boy who ever raced around the track, winning, and then, seeing his friends a mile back somewhere, stumbled and fell, waited for them to catch up, and joined breast to breast, breaking the winner's tape. The jolliest boy who ever hunted out all the haunted houses in town, which are hard to find, and came back to report on them and take all the kids to ramble through the basements and scramble up the ivy outside the bricks and shout down the chimneys and make water off the roofs, hooting and chimpanzee dancing and ape bellowing. The day Joe Pipkin was born, all the orange crush and knee-high soda bottles in the world fizzed over, and joyful bees swarmed countrysides to sting maiden ladies. On his birthdays, the lake pulled out from the shore in midsummer and ran back with a tidal wave of boys, a big leap of bodies and a down crash of laughs. Dawns, lying in bed, you heard a bird peck at your window. Pipkin. You stuck your head out onto the snow-water-clear summer morning air. There in the dew on the lawn, rabbit prints showed where, just a moment ago, not a dozen rabbits but one rabbit had circled and crisscrossed in a glory of life and exultation, bounding the hedges, clipping the ferns, tromping the clover. It resembled the switch yards down at the rail depot. A million tracks in the grass, but no. Pipkin. And here he rose up like a wild sunflower in the garden, his great round face burned with fresh sun. His eyes flashed Morse code signals. Hurry up, it's almost over. What? Today, now, 6 a.m. Dive down, wade in it. Or, the summer, before you know, bang, it's gone, quick. And he sank away in sunflowers to come up all onions. Pipkin. Oh dear Pipkin. Finest and loveliest of boys. How he ran so fast no one knew. His tennis shoes were ancient. They were colored green of forests jogged through, brown from old harvest trudges through September a year back, tar-stained from sprints along the docks and beaches where the coal barges came in, yellow from careless dogs, splinter-filled from climbing wood fences. His clothes were scarecrow clothes, worn by Pipkin's dogs at night, loaned to them for strolls through town with chew marks along the cuffs and fall marks on the seat. His hair, His hair was a great hedgehog bristle of bright brown blonde daggers sticking out in all directions. His ears, pure peach fuzz, his hands mittened with dust and the good smell of Airedales and peppermint, and stolen peaches from the far country orchards. Pipkin, an assemblage of speeds, smells, textures, a cross section of all the boys who ever ran, fell, got up, and ran again. No one in all the years had ever seen him sitting still. He was hard to remember in school, in one seat for 1 hour. He was the last into the schoolhouse when it first exploded, and out when the He was the last into the schoolhouse, and the first exploded out when the bell ended the day. Pipkin, sweet Pipkin, who yodeled and played the kazoo and hated girls more than any other boys in the gang combined. Pipkin, whose arm around your shoulder and secret whisper of great doings this day protected you from the world. Pipkin. God got up early just to see Pipkin come out of his house, like one of those people on a weathercock. And the weather was always fine where Pipkin was. Pipkin. They stood in front of his house. Any moment now, that door would open wide. Pipkin would jump out in a blast of fire and smoke, and Halloween would really begin. Come on, Joe. Come on, Pipkin, they whispered. Come on. Let's see. Chapter 3. The front door opened. Pipkin stepped out. Not flew, not banged, not exploded. Stepped out. And came down the walk to meet his friends, not running and not wearing a mask. No mask, but moving along like an old man almost. Pipkin, they shouted to scare away their uneasiness. Hi, gang, said Pipkin. His face was pale. He tried to smile, but his eyes looked funny. He was holding his right side with one hand as if he had a boil there. They all looked at his hand, and he took his hand away from his side. Well, he said with faint enthusiasm, we ready to go? Yeah, but you don't look ready, said Tom. You sick? On Halloween? Are you kidding? Where's your costume? You go on ahead, I'll catch up. No, Pipkin, we'll wait for you. Go on, said Pipkin, saying it slowly, his face deathly pale now. His hand was back on his side. You got a stomach ache? Asked Tom. You told your folks? No, I can't. Tears burst from Pipkin's eyes. It's nothing, I tell you. Look, go straight on towards the ravine. Head for the house, okay? The place of haunts. Yeah? I'll meet you there. You swear? Swear. Wait till you'll see my costume. The boys began to back off. On the way, they touched his elbow or knocked him gently on the chest or ran their knuckles along his chin in a fake fight. Okay, Pipkin, as long as you're sure. I'm sure. He took his hand away from his side. His face colored for a moment as if the pain were gone. On your marks. Get set. Go! When Joe Pipkin said go, they went. They ran. They ran backwards halfway down the block so they could see Pipkin standing there, waving at them. Hurry up, Pipkin! I'll catch you, he shouted, a long way off. The night swallowed him. They ran, and when they looked back again, he was gone. They banged doors, they shouted trick-or-treats, and their brown paper bags began to fill with incredible sweets. They galloped with their teeth glued shut with pink gum. They ran with red wax lips bedazzling their faces. But all the people who met them at doors looked like candy factory duplicates of their own mothers and fathers. It was like never leaving home. Too much kindness flashed from every window and every portal. What they wanted was to hear dragons belch in basements and banged castle doors. And so, still looking back for Pipkin, they reached the edge of the town and the place where the civilization fell away into darkness. The ravine, filled with varieties of night sounds, lurkings of black ink streams and creeks, lingerings of autumns that rolled over in fire and bronze and died 1,000 years ago. From this deep place sprang mushroom and toadstool and cold stone frog and crawdad and spider. There was a long tunnel down there under the earth in which poisoned waters dripped and echoes never ceased calling, come, come, and if you do, you'll stay forever, forever, forever. So run, rush, whisper, and never go, go. The boys lined up at the rim of the darkness looking down. And then Tom Skelton, cold in his bones, whistled his breath in his teeth like the wind bowling over the bedroom screen at night. He pointed, Hey, there, That's where Pipkin told us to go. He vanished. All looked. They saw his small-shaped face down the dirt path into 100 million tons of night, all crammed in the huge, dark pit. That dank cellar, that delicious, frightening ravine. Yelling, they plunged after. And where they had been was empty. The town was left behind to suffer itself with sweetness. Chapter 4. They ran down the ravine at a swift rush, all laughing, jostling, all elbows and ankles, all steamy snort and roustabout, to stop in collision where Tom Skelton stopped and pointed up the path. There! There's only one house in this town worth visiting on Halloween. There. Yeah. For it was true. The house was special, fine, dark, and tall. There must have been 1,000 windows in its sides, all shimmering with cold stars. It looked as if it had been cut out of black marble, instead of built out of timbers. And inside, who could guess how many rooms, halls, breezeways, attics, superior and inferior attics, some higher than others, some more filled with dust and webs and ancient leaves of gold, buried into the ground and the sky, but lost away so no high ladder in town could take you there. The house beckoned with its towers, invited with its gloomed shut doors. Pirate ships are tonic, ancient forts are a boon, but a house, a haunted house on All Hallows Eve? 8 small hearts beat up an absolute storm of glory and approbation. Come on! But they were already crowding up the path, until they stood at last by the crumbling wall, looked up and still further up at the great tomb-yard top of the old house. For that's what it seemed. The high mountain peak of the mansion was littered with what looked like black bones or iron rods, and enough chimneys to choke out smoke signals from 3 dozen fires on sooty hearths, hidden far below in the dim bowels of this monster place. With so many chimneys, the roof seemed a vast cemetery, each chimney signifying the burial place of some old god of fire or enchantress of steam, smoke, and firefly spark. Even as they watched, a kind of bleak exhalation of soot breathed up out of some 4 dozen flues, darkening the sky until more and more putting out some stars. Boy, said Tom Skelton. Pipkin sure knows what he's talking about. Boy, they all agreed. They crept along a weed-infested path toward the crumbled front porch. Tom Skelton alone inched his bony foot up to the first porch step. The others gasped at his bravery. So, now, finally in a mob, a compact mass of sweaty boys moving up the porch amid fierce cries of planks underfoot and shudderings of their bodies, each wished to pull back, swivel about, run, but found himself trapped against the boy behind or in front or to the side. So, with a pseudopod thrust out here in an amoebic form, the large perspiration of boys leaned and made a run up and a stop at the front door of the house, which was as tall as a coffin and twice as thin. They stood there for a long moment, various hands reaching out like the legs of an immense spider as if to twist the cold knob or reach up for the knocker on the front door. Meanwhile, the wooden floorings of the porch sank and wallowed beneath their weight, threatening at every shift of proportion to give way and fling them into some cockroach abyss beneath. The planks, each tuned to an A or an F or a C, sang out their uncanny music as heavy shoes scraped on them. And if there had been time, or if it were noon, they might have danced out a cadaver's tune or a skeleton's rigadoon. For who can resist an ancient porch which, like a giant xylophone, only wants to be jumped on to make music? But they were not thinking this. Henry Hank Smith, that's who it was, hidden inside of his black witch's costume, cried, "Look!" And all looked at the knocker on the door. Tom's hand trembled to touch it. A Marley knocker. What? You know, Scrooge and Marley, A Christmas Carol? Indeed, the face that made up the knocker on the door was a face of a man with a dread toothache. His jaw bandaged, his hair askew, his teeth prolapsed, his eyes wild, dead as a doornail Marley, friend to Scrooge, inhabitor of lands beyond the grave, doomed to wander this earth forever until... Knock, said Henry Hank. Tom Skelton took a hold of the old Marley's cold and grizzled jaw, lifted it, and let it fall. All jumped at the concussion. The entire house shook, its bones ground together, shades snapped furled up so that windows blinked wide their ghastly eyes. Tom Skelton cat leapt onto the porch rail, staring up. On the rooftop, weird weathercocks spun. Two-headed roosters whirled in the sneezing wind. A gargoyle on the western rim of the house erupted twin snorts of funnel dust. And down in the long, snaking serpentine rainspouts of the house after Sneeze had died, the weathercocks ceased spinning. Vagrant wisps of autumn leaves and cobweb fell, gusting onto the dark grass. Tom whirled to look at the faint, shuddering windows. Moonlit reflections trembled in the grass like schools of disturbed silver minnows. Then the front door gave a shake, a twist of its knob, a grimace of its marley knocker, and it flung itself wide. The wind made by the sudden opening door almost knocked the boys off the porch. They seized one another's elbows, yelling. Then the darkness within the house inhaled. A wind sucked through the gaping door. It pulled at the boys, dragged them across the porch. They had to lean back so as not to be snatched into the deep, dark hall. They struggled, shouted, clutched at the porch rails. Then the wind ceased. Darkness moved darkness. Inside the house, a long way off, someone was walking towards the door. Whoever it was must have been dressed in all black, for they could see nothing but a pale white face drifting in the air. An evil smile came and hung the doorway for them. Behind the smile, the tall man hid in shadow. They could see his eyes now, small pinpoints of green fire and charred pits of sockets looking out at them. Well, said Tom. Trick or treat. Trick, said the smile in the dark. Treat? Yes, sir. The wind played a flute in the chimney somewhere, an old song about time and dark and far places. The tall man shut up his smile like a bright pocket knife. No treats, he said. Only trick. The door slammed. The house thundered with showers of dust. Dust puffed out of the rainspouts again in fluffs like an emergence of downy cats. Dust gasped from open windows. Dust snorted from the porch boards under their feet. The boys stared at the locked, shut fast front door. The Marley knocker was not scowling now, but smiling an evil smile. What did he mean? Asked Tom. No treats? Only trick? Backing off around the side of the house, they were astonished at the sounds it made. The whole rigmarole of whispers, squeaks, creaks, wails, and murmurs, and the night wind was careful to let the boys not hear them. With every step they took, the great house leaned after them with soft groan. They rounded the far side of the house and stopped, for there was the tree. It was such a tree as they had never seen in all their lives. It stood in the middle of a vast yard behind the terribly strange house, and this tree rose up some 100 feet in the air, taller than the high roofs, and full and round and well branched, and covered all over with a rich assortment of red, brown, and autumn leaves. But, whispered Tom, look! What's up in that tree? For the tree was hung with a variety of pumpkins of every shape and size, and a number of tints and hues of smoky yellow or bright orange. A pumpkin tree, someone said. No, said Tom. The wind blew among the high branches and tossed their bright burdens softly. A Halloween tree, said Tom. He was right. One second, guys. We're going to take a short break. Everybody enjoying it? Like I said, this is one of my favorite. This is one of my favorite books, partially because of the way it's written. Bradbury has a way with words. Let's see. All right. Let me take a look. We're currently on chapter 5. The whole story is 19 chapters. So we're actually plowing through really quick. Like I said, this is a kid's book. It is. It's not something that's like. Um, it's not something that's really. What am I trying to say? It is a children's book, and so therefore it's not something that's really complicated. Um, but the way it's written is it's one of the reasons I like it is it's not really. It doesn't treat kids like kids. It treats kids like small adults who just don't know as much. Which may sound strange, but and may sound like isn't that how you're supposed to treat kids? But you'd be surprised. All right, so we ready? We can continue on to chapter 5. People are actually sending me messages being like, "How do we watch? How do we watch?" So I'm just kind of that's why I keep looking aside at my phone. Uh, Excuse me. Chapter 5. The pumpkins on the tree were not mere pumpkins. Each had a face sliced into it. Each face was different. Every eye a stranger eye. Every nose was a weirder nose. Every mouth smiled hideously in some new way. There must have been 1,000 pumpkins in this tree, hung high and on every branch. 1,000 smiles, 1,000 grimaces, twice times 1,000 glares, and winks and blinks and leerings of fresh cut eyes. And as the boys watched, a new thing happened. The pumpkins began to come alive. One by one, starting at the bottom of the tree, and the nearest pumpkin's candles took fire within their raw interiors. This one, and then that one, and this, and still another, and on up and around. 3 pumpkins here, 7 pumpkins still higher, a dozen clustered beyond 100, 500, 1,000 pumpkins lit their candles, which is to say, brightened up their faces to show fire in their square or round or curiously slanted eyes. Flame guttered in their toothed mouths, sparks leapt in their ripe cut ears, and from somewhere 2 voices, a 3, maybe even 4 voices whispered and chanted a kind of sing-song or old sea shanty of the sky and time and earth clung turning over into sleep. The rain spouts blew spider dust. It's big. It's broad. A voice smoked from the chimney top. It's broad. It's bright. Fills the house. Fills the sky on All Hallows Night. From open windows somewhere cobwebs drifted. The strangest sight you ever see. The monster tree. Halloween. The candles flickered and flared. The wind crooned in, the wind crooned out, and the pumpkin mouths turning the song. The leaves have burned to gold and red. The grass is brown. The old dead. But hang the harvest high, O sea, the candle constellations on the Halloween tree. Tom felt his mouth stir like a small mouse wanting to sing. The stars they turn, the candles burn. The mouse leaves scurry on the cold wind borne, and a mob of smiles shine down on thee. The gourds hung high on the Halloween tree. The smile of the witch, the smile of the cat, the smile of the beast, the smile of the bat, the smile of the reaper taking his fee, all cut and glimmer on the Halloween tree. Smoke seemed to sift from Tom's mouth. Halloween tree. All the boys whispered. Halloween and then there was silence. And during the silence, the last of the triples and quadruples of All Hallows tree candles were lit, and a titanic constellation woven through the dark branches and peeking down through the twigs and crisp leaves. The tree had now become one vast, substantial smile. The last of the pumpkins were now lit. The air around the tree was Indian summer breathing warm. The tree exhaled sooty smoke and raw pumpkin smell upon them. "Gosh," said Tom Skelton. "Hey, what kind of place is this?" asked Henry Hank the witch. "I mean, first the house, that man and no treats, only tricks. And now, I never saw a tree like this in my life. Like a Christmas tree, only bigger, and all those candles and pumpkins, and what does it mean? What does it celebrate?" "Celebrate," a vast voice whispered somewhere. Perhaps a chimney soot bellows, or perhaps the windows of the house opened like mouths at the same moment behind them, sliding up and sliding down, announcing the word "Celebrate," with breathings out of darkness. "Yes," said the gigantic whisper, which trembled candles in the pumpkins. "Celebration." The boys leapt around, but the house was still. The windows were closed and brimming with pools of moonlight. "Last one in is an old maid," cried Tom suddenly. A bond of leaves lay waiting like old fire's old gold, and the boys ran and dived at the huge lovely pile of autumn treasure. And in the moment of diving, about to vanish beneath the leaves and the crisp swarms, yelling, shouting, shoving, falling, there was an immense gulp of breath, a seizing in the air. The boys yelped, pulled back as if an invisible whip had struck them. For coming out of that pile of leaves was a bony white hand, all by itself. And following it, all smiles, hidden one moment but now revealed as it slid upward, was a white skull. And what had been a delicious pool of oak and elm and poplar leaves to thrash and sink and hide in, now became the last place in the world that all the boys wanted to be, for the bony white hand was flying in the air, and the white skull rose to hover before them. The boys fell back, colliding, sneezing out their air in panics, until in one wild mass they fell flat on the earth, and writhed and tore in the grass and to fight free, scramble, and try to run. "Help!" they cried. "Oh, yes, help," said the skull, and then peal after peal of laughter froze them further. As the hand upon the air, the bony hand reached up and took hold of the white skull face and peeled it off and down. The boys blinked once behind their masks. Their jaws dropped, though none could see them dropping. The huge man in dark clothes soared out of the leaves, taller and yet taller. He grew like a tree. He put out branches that were his hands, and he stood framed against the Halloween tree itself, his outstretched arms and long, white, bony fingers festooned with orange globes of fire and burning smiles. His eyes were pressed tight as he roared his laughter. His mouth gaped wide to let the autumn wind rush out. "No treat, boys. No, not treat. Trick, boys. Trick." Skip that too soon. They lay there waiting for the earthquake to come, and it came. The tall man's laughter took hold of the ground and gave it a shake. This tremor passed through their bones and out of their mouths, and it came out the form of still more laughter. They sat up amidst the ruins of the threshed about pile of leaves, surprised. They put their hands to their masks to feel the hot air leaping out in small gusts of echoing mirth. And the boys looked up at the man. As if to verify their surprise. "Yes, boys, that was a trick. You'd forgotten? No, you never knew." and he leaned against the tree, finishing out his fits of happiness, shaking the trunk, making the 1,000 pumpkins shiver, and the fires inside smoke and dance. Warmed by their laughter, the boys got to their feet to feel their bones to see if anything was broken. Nothing was. They stood in a small mob under the Halloween tree, waiting, for they knew that this was only the beginning of something new, special, grand, and fine. "Well," said Tom Skelton. "Well, Tom," said the man. "Tom," cried everyone else, "is that you?" Tom in the skeleton mask stiffened. "Or is it Bob? Or Fred? No, no, no. It must be Ralph," said the man quickly. "All of those," cried Tom, clapping his mask hard in place, relieved. "Yeah, all," said everyone. The man nodded, smiling. "Well, now that you know something about about Halloween that you never knew before, how did you like my trick?" Trick, yes, trick. The boys were catching fire with the idea. It made all the good glue go out of their joints and put a little dust of sin in their blood. They felt it stir around until it pumped up onto the light of their eyes and stretched their lips to show their happy dog teeth. "Yeah, sure. Is this what you used to do on Halloween?" asked the witch boy. "This and more. But let me introduce myself. Moundshroud is the name. Carapace clavicle Moundshroud. Does that have a ring, boys? Does it sound for you?" It sounds, the boys thought. Oh, it sounds. Moundshroud. "A fine name," said Mr. Moundshroud, giving it a full sepulchral church night sound. "And a fine night. And all the deep, dark, wild, long history of Halloween waiting to swallow us whole." "Swallow us?" "Yes," cried Moundshroud. "Lads, look at yourselves. Why are you, boy, wearing that skull face? And you, boy, carrying a scythe? And you, lad, made up like a witch? And you? And you?" He thrust his bony finger at each mask. "You don't know, do you? You just put on those faces and old mothball clothes and jump out, but you don't really know, do you?" "Well," said Tom, a mouse behind his skull-white muslin. No." "Yeah," said the devil boy. "Come to think of it, why am I wearing this?" He fingered his red cloak and sharp rubber horns and lovely pitchfork. "And me this," said the ghost, trailing his long white graveyard sheets. And all the boys were given to wonder and touched their own costumes and refit their own masks. "Then, wouldn't it be fun for you to find out?" asked Mr. Moundshroud. "I'll tell you. No, I'll show you. If only there was time." "It's only 6:30. Halloween hasn't even begun," said Tom in his cold bones. "True," said Moundshroud. "All right, lads, come along." He strode. They ran. At the edge of the deep, dark night ravine, he pointed over the rim of the hills and the earth, away from the light of the moon, under the dim light of the half-strange stars. The wind fluttered his black cloak, and the hood of his half-shadowed, now half-revealed most of his fleshless face. "There. Do you see it, lads?" "What?" "The undiscovered country. Out there. Look long, look deep. Make a feast. The past, boys. Oh, the past. Oh, it's dark, yes, and full of nightmare. Everything that Halloween ever was lies buried. Will you dig for bones, boys? Do you have the stuff?" He burned his gaze at them. "What is Halloween? Where did it start? How did it start? Why? What for? Witches, cats, mummy dusts, haunts. It's all there in that country from which no one returns. Will you dive into the dark ocean, boys? Will you fly in the dark sky?" The boys swallowed hard. Someone peeped. "We'd like to, but Pipkin. We've got to wait for Pipkin." "Oh yeah, Pipkin sent us to your place. We couldn't go without him." As if summoned in this instant, they heard a cry from the far side of the ravine. "Hey, here I am!" cried a frail voice. They saw his small figure standing with a lit pumpkin on the far ravine ledge. This way! They yelled. Pipkin, quick! Coming! Was the cry. I don't feel so good, but I had to come. Wait for me! Weird. It's not turning pages on me for some reason. Give me a second. May have to switch to the actual book. Okay. Sorry. What? I own this. Okay. Give me a second, guys. Do it's hang on. Sorry, I don't know what's going on. It apparently I own this book. Like I bought it both in ebook and hardcover. Come on. Barnes and Noble's being stupid and saying that I don't own this book when I do. Here we go. Sorry about that. Apparently, if you don't use the website enough, it thinks that you've actually signed out or something. Sorry. Some more water. Moundshroud's voice actually gives my throat a bit of a beating. Okay. It depends on how much time is taking us. Now we've gone through like a good, like at least a quarter of the book now, more than a quarter of the book now, and it's we've only been reading for about an hour or so. We'll see if we can get it done tonight, Squishy. Okay. They saw his small figure run down the middle of the ravine on the path. Oh, wait! Please wait! The voice began to fail. I don't feel well. I can't run. Hang on. Did I miss something? Making sure. Oh, wait, no, I didn't. Okay. Sorry. I got confused. The small boy running with Excuse me. Oh, wait, please wait, the voice began to wail. I began to fail. I don't feel well. I can't run. Can't. Pipkin! Everyone shouted, waving from the edge of the cliff. His figure was small. There were shadows mixed everywhere. Bats flew, owls shrieked, night ravens clustered like black leaves in trees. The small boy running with his lit pumpkin fell. Oh, gasped Moundshroud. The pumpkin light went out. Oh, everyone said. Light your pumpkin, Pip! Light it! Shrieked Tom. He thought he saw a small figure scrabbling in the dark grass below, trying to strike a light. But in that instant of darkness, the night swept in. A great wing folded over the abyss. Many owls hooted. Many mice scampered and slithered into the shadows. A million tiny murders happened somewhere. Light your pumpkin, Pip! Help! Wailed his sad voice. 1,000 wings flew away. A great beast beat the air somewhere like a thumping drum. The clouds, like gauzy scenes, were pulled away to set a clear sky. The moon was there, a great eye. It looked down upon them. An empty path. Pipkin was nowhere to be seen. Way off towards the horizon, something dark fritted and danced and slithered away in the cold star air. Help! Help! Wailed a fading voice. Then it was gone. Oh, warned Mr. Moundshroud, this is bad. I fear something has taken him away. Where? Where? Gibbered all the boys. Cold. To the undiscovered country. The place I wanted to show you, but now... You don't mean that thing in the ravine, or him, or whatever that something was death? Did he grab Pipkin and run? Borrowed is more like it. Perhaps to hold him for ransoms, said Moundshroud. Death do that? Sometimes, yes. Gosh, Tom felt his eyes water. Pip, tonight running slow? So pale? Pip, you shouldn't have come out! He shouted at the sky, but there was only wind there, and white clouds floating like old spirit fluff on a clear river of wind. They stood, cold, shivering. They looked off to where the dark something had stolen their friend. So, said Moundshroud, all the more reason for you to come along, lads. If we fly fast, maybe we can catch Pipkin, grab his sweet Halloween candy corn soul, bring him back, pop him in bed, toast him warm, and save his breath. What say, lads? Would you solve 2 mysteries in one? Search and seek for lost Pipkin and solve Halloween all in one dark blow? They thought of All Hallows Night and the billion ghosts wandering the lonely lanes in cold winds and strange smokes. They thought of Pipkin, no more than a thimbleful of boy in sheer summer delight, torn out like a tooth and carried on the black tide of web and horn and black soot. And almost as one, they murmured, yes. Moundshroud sprang, he ran, he pummeled, he pushed, he raved. Quick now, along the path, up the rise, along the road, the abandoned farm, over the fence, sally-oop! They leapt the fence, running, and stood by a barn that was frosted over with old circus posters, with banners tattered by wind, pasted here 30, 40, 50 years back. Circuses passing through and left patches and swaths of themselves 10 inches thick. A kite, boys! Build a kite! Quick! Chapter 7. No sooner had he cried this than Mr. Moundshroud ripped a great tissue from the side of the barn. It fluttered in his hands, the eye of a tiger, another rip from the ancient poster in the mouth of a lion. The boys heard roars of Africa down on the wind. They blinked, they ran, they scratched with fingernails, they plucked with hands, they sieved off strips and patches and huge rolls of animal flesh, of fang, of piercing eye, of wounded flank, of blood-red claw, of tail, of bound and leap and cry. The whole side of the barn was an ancient parade stopped dead. They tore it asunder, and with each tear that pulled off talon, tongue, or ravening feline eye, beneath waited layer upon layer of jungle nightmare, delicious encounters with polar bears, panicked zebras, milling prides of lions, charging rhinos, clambering gorillas which pawed up the side of midnight and swung towards dawn. 1,000 animals in congregation rumbled to be set free, now free in fists and hands and fingers. Whistling on the autumn wind, the boys raced across the grass. Now Moundshroud knocked down an old fence railing beam and made a rough kite cross and bound them with wire, and then stood back to receive the gifts of kite paper as the boys flung them in fistfuls, and these he tossed in place upon the frame, and spark flinting fused with burning in his hoary hands. Hey, the boys cried to their delight, look! And they had never seen such things, or known that men such as Moundshroud, with a pinch, a clutch, a pressure of fingers, might blend an eye with tooth, a tooth with mouth, a mouth with feline bobcat tail, all all mingled beautifully into a single thing, a wild jigsaw, puzzle jungle zoo, billowed and trapped, pasted and tied, growing, taking color and sound and pattern in the light of the ascending moon. Now another cannibal eye, now another hungry maw, a mad chimpanzee, a most insane mandrill ape, a screaming butcher bird. The boys ran up with their last frights handed over, and the kite finished, the ancient flesh laid out, fused by the still blue smoke burning hoary hands. Mr. Moundshroud lit a cigar with the last bit of fire that sparked on his thumb and smiled. And the light from his smile showed the kite for what it was, a kite of destructions, of animals so dire and fierce their outcry drowned the wind and murdered the heart. He was pleased. Boys were pleased, for the kite somehow began to resemble. Why, said Tom, astounded, a pterodactyl. A what? A pterodactyl! Those ancient flying reptiles gone some billion years back and never seen again. Replied, sorry, I was in the wrong voice. Pterodactyl, those ancient flying reptiles gone some billion years back and never seen again, replied Mr. Moundshroud. Well said, boy. Pterodactyl it seems it is, and will fly us downwind to perdition, or Land's End, or some other fine-sounding place. But now, rope, twine, string, quick, filch and carry. They ran the rope off an old abandoned clothesline strung between the barn and an abandoned farmhouse. It took 90 feet or more of rope they brought. A good 90 feet or more of rope they brought Mr. Moundshroud, who snaked it through his fist till it smoked a most unholy smoke. He tied it to the middle of the vast kite, which flapped like somehow lost an out-of-water manta ray upon the high, strange beach. It struggled with wind to live. It flapped and floundered on the heaves of tidal air and laid in the grass. Moundshroud stood back and gave it a jerk, and lo, the kite flew. It hung low upon the air at the end of its clothesline, a dumb brute groveling of wind, veering this way, dashing that, leaping up suddenly to confront them with a wall of eyes, a solid flesh of teeth, a storm of cries. It won't rise. It won't go straight. A tail! We need a tail! And as if by instinct, Tom dived first and seized the tail by its bottom. He hung there, the kite steadied and began to rise. Yes, cried the dark man. Oh, lad, you are the one, bright boy, you be the tail, and more, and more. As the kite slowly ascended the cold river of swift-flowing air, each boy in turn, seized with the whim pouring by his wits, became more, and yet more of the tail. Which is to say, Henry Hank, disguised as a witch, grabbed Tom's ankles, and now the kite had two boys for its magnificent tail, and Ralph Bergstrom, wound in his mummy clothes, stumbling over his winding tapes, smothered in his burial rags, shambled forward, jumped, and grabbed Henry Hank's ankles. So three boys hung now in a tail. Wait, here I come, cried the beggar, whose under his dirt and rags was really Fred Fryer. He jumped, he caught. The kite ascended, the four boys making the tail yelled for more length. They got it when the boy dressed as an ape man scrambled and grabbed ankles, followed by the boy dressed as Death with a scythe, who did dangerously likewise. Watch out with that scythe. Watch out with that scythe! The scythe fell and lay on the grass like a lost smile. But the two boys hung down now from from all the half-washed ankles, and the kite rose more, higher and higher, adding a boy and a boy and a boy until with a yell and shout 8 boys were down hung in a magnificent thrashing tale. The last 2 being Ghost, who was truly George Smith, and Wally Bab, who, inspired, made himself to look like a gargoyle fallen off the top of the cathedral. The boys yelled with elation. The kite swooped and took off. Hey! Whooshing, the kite purred 1,000 animal whispers. Whang! The kite rope strummed the wind. Hush, said the entire thing, and the wind flew from high across the stars, leaving Moundshroud to look up with awe at his contraption, his kite, his boys. Wait! He shouted. Don't wait! Come on! Moundshroud ran along the grass to seize the scythe. His cape fluttered, taking air, making wings, until he, also very simply, took off and soared. Chapter 8. The kite flew. The boys hung down from the kite like a fine lizard's tail, now weaving, now looping, now snapping, now gliding. They yelled with delight, they shrieked with outgasped terror. They ran across the moon with an exclamation point. They soared over the hills and meadows and farms. They saw themselves reflected in dusky, moon-bright streams, creeks, and rivers. They brushed over ancient trees. The wind stirred by their passing shook down whole government mints of coins, leaves bright showering to the black-grassed earth. They flew over the town and thought, look up, see, here we are, your sons. And thought, look down, there's some of our mothers, fathers, sisters, teachers. Hey, here we are, someone see us or you'll never believe. And in a vast swoop, the kite whistled, hummed, drummed along the winds to float over the old house and the Halloween tree where they had first met Moundshroud. Swoop, flutter, guide, rush, hiss. The suction of their swung bodies caused 1,000 candles to flutter, flicker, stutter their light, hiss with desire to reflame themselves, so all the hung pumpkin scowls and leers and wild smiles were half snuffed to unhappy shadows. The whole tree went dead for a heartbeat. Then, as the kite sang high, the tree blazed up with 1,000 new-cut pumpkin frowns, glares, grimaces, and grins. The windows of the house, black mirrors, saw the kite go away and away until the boys and the kite and Mr. Moundshroud were very small on the horizon. And then down they sailed away into the undiscovered country of old death and strange years in the frightful past. Where are we going? Cried Tom, hanging on the kite's tail. Where? Where? Cried all the boys, one after another below them. Not where, but when, said Moundshroud, pacing them, his great veiled cloak full of moon, wind, and time. 2,000, count them, 2,000 years before Christ. Pipkin's there waiting. I smell it. Fly! Then the moon began to blink. It closed up its eye, and then there was darkness. And then faster and faster it began to wink, to wax, to wane, and to wax again, until 1,000 times over it flickered, and in flickering changed the landscape below, and then 50,000 times, so fast they could not see it. The moon extinguished and relit itself. The moon stopped, winking, and held very still, and the land was changed. Look, said Moundshroud, hung upon the very air above them. And the million tiger, lion, leopard, panthered eyes of the autumn kite looked down, as did the eyes of the boys, and the sun rose, showing Egypt, the river Nile, the Sphinx, the pyramids. But, said Moundshroud, notice anything different? Why, gasped Tom, it's all new. It's just been built. That means we really have gone back in time 4,000 years. And sure enough, the Egypt that lay below was ancient sand, but was not ancient sand, but new cut stone. Excuse me, I'm reading this all wrong. And sure enough, the Egypt that lay below was ancient sand, but new cut stone. The Sphinx, with its great lion paws treaded out on old golden stuffs of desert, was sharp cut, and freshly born out of the womb of Storm Mountain. I have lost the ability to read. Was fresh cut and freshly born out of the womb of Stone Mountains. It was a vast pup in the bright and empty glare of noon. If the sun had fallen and lay between its paws, it would have cuffed it like a fireball toy. The pyramids, why, they lay like strange-shaped blocks, yet another game to be puzzled over and played with by the woman-lion sphinx. The kite zoomed down and skirted the sand dunes, layered over one pyramid, and was drawn as if by suction by an open tomb mouth set in a small cliff. Hey, presto! And with a clap he gave the kite such a kick as to make the boys toll like clamorous bells. Yay! No! They cried. The kite shuddered, fell down, and hovered 10 feet above the dunes, and shook itself like a wild dog ridding itself of fleas. The boys fell safe in golden sand. The kite broke away on 1,000 shreds of eyes, fangs, shrieks, roars, elephant trumpetings. The Egyptian tomb mouth sucked them in, and Moundshroud laughing with it. Mr. Moundshroud, wait! Leaping up, the boys began to shout into the dark tomb doorway. They lifted their gaze and saw where they were, the Valley of the Kings, where huge stone gods loomed over them. Dust shifted in a strange downpour of tears from their eyes, tears made of sand and powdered rock. The boys leaned into the deep shadows. Like a dry river bottom, the corridors led down into deep vaults, where lay the linen-wrapped dead. Dust fountains echoed and played in strange courtyards a mile below. The boys ached, listening. The tomb breathed out a sick exhalation of paprika, cinnamon, and powdered camel dung. Somewhere a mummy dreamed, coughed in its sleep, unraveled a bandage, twitched its dusty tongue, and turned over for another 1,000 years' snooze. Mr. Moundshroud? Called Tom. Chapter 9. And from deep within the dry earth, a lost voice whispered, Moundshroud. Out of the darkness, something rolled, rushed, flapped. A long strip of mummy cloth snapped out into the sunlight. It was as if the very tomb itself had stuck out its dry tongue, which lay at their feet. The boys stared. The linen strip was hundreds of yards long and might, if they wished, lead them down into the mysterious deeps below the Egyptian earth. Tom Skelton, trembling, put one toe out to touch the yellow linen strip. A wind blew from the tombs, saying, Yes. Here I go, said Tom. And balancing on the tightrope of linen, he wandered down and vanished in the dark underneath the burial chamber. Yes, whispered the wind coming up from below. All of you, come. Next and next, and another. Quick. The boys raced down the linen path into darkness. Watch for murder, boys. Murder. The pillars on both sides of the rushing boys flashed to life. Pictures shivered and moved. The golden sun was on every pillar, but it was a sun with arms and legs bound tight with mummy wrappings. Murder! A dark creature struck the sun one dreadful blow. The sun died, its fires went out. The boys ran blind into darkness. Yeah, thought Tom, running. Sure, I think every night the sun dies, going to sleep. I wonder if it will ever come back. Tomorrow morning, will it still be dead? The boys ran on new pillars dead ahead, the sun appearing again, burning out in eclipse. Swell, thought Tom. That's it. Sunrise. But just as quickly, the sun was murdered again. On each pillar they raced by, the sun died in autumn and was buried in cold winter. Middle of December, thought Tom. I often think the sun will never come back. Winter will go on forever. This time the sun is really dead. What's up, Penguin? But as the boys slowed at the edge of the long corridor, The sun was reborn. Spring arrived with golden horns. Light filled the corridor with pure light. The strange god stood burning on every wall, his face a grand fire of triumph, wrapped in golden ribbons. Why, heck, I know who that is, panted Henry Hank. I saw him in a movie I saw in a movie once with terrible Egyptian mummies. Osiris, said Tom. Yes, hissed Moundshroud's voice from the deep tombs. Lesson number 1 about Halloween. Osiris, son of the earth and sky, killed each night by his brother Darkness. Osiris, slain by autumn, murdered by his own night blood. So it goes in every country, boys. Each has its death festival, having to do with seasons. Skulls and bones, boys. Skeletons and ghosts. In Egypt, lads, see the death of Osiris, king of the dead. Gaze long. Boys gazed, for they had come to a vast hole in the underground cavern, and through this hole they could look out into an Egyptian village, where at dusk food was being placed out in pottery and copper dishes on the porches and sills. For the homecoming ghosts, whispered Moundshroud somewhere in the shadows. Rows of oil lamps were nailed to house fronts, and the soft smoke from these rose up on the twilight air like wandering spirits. You could almost see the haunts shifting along cobbled streets. The shadows leaned away from the lost sun in the west and tried to enter houses, but the warm food steaming on the porches kept their shadows circling and stirring. A faint smell of incense and mummy dust wafted up to the boys who looked out upon the ancient Halloween and the treats being set forth not for wandering boys, but for homeless ghosts. Hey, whispered all the boys. Don't lose your way in the dark, voices sang in the houses to harps and lutes. Oh, sweet dead, come home and welcome you. Lost in the dark, but always clear. Do not wander, do not roam. Dear ones, come home. Smoke curled from the dim lamps, and the shadows stepped up on the porches and very gently touched the gifts of food. And in one house they could see an old grandfather mummy being taken out of a closet and put in the place of honor at the head of the table, with food set before him. And the members of the family sat down unto their evening meal and lifted their glasses and drank to the dead ones seated there, all dust, dry silence. Yeah. That's the end of that chapter. Now, welcome to the stream, Uncle Penguin. Pull up a chair. Sorry. Again, just clearing a whole bunch of shit out. All right. I believe it was DC. Chapter 10. Quick now, come find me. Moundshroud's voice laughed and called them on. This way, no this, this. They ran upon the slender ribbon of mummy wrapping deep into the earth. Yes, here I am. They turned a corner and stopped, for the long linen ribbon wound across the tomb floor and up a wall to wrap around the feet of an ancient brown mummy, which was propped alit in a candle niche. Stuttered Ralph Bergstrom, dressed in his own mummy costume. Is that a real mummy? Yes. Dust sifted from under the golden mask on the mummy's face. Real. Mr. Moundshroud, you? The gold mask fell into clang and like a bright bell on the floor. Where the mask had been was a mummy's face, a pool of brown mud sprinkled by blasts of sun. One eye was glued shut with spiderweb, the other eye cracked forth tears of dust and a glint of bright blue glass. Is there some boy here dressed as a mummy? Asked the voice, muffled beneath the shroud. Why, me, sir, squeaked Ralph, showing his arms, legs, chest, the medical bandages it had taken him all afternoon to wrap himself in, mummified. Good, sighed Moundshroud. Grab the linen strip. Pull. Ralph bent, took hold of the ancient mummy bandages, and yanked. The ribbon unraveled around to reveal the great ancient reptile nose, bleak and flaky chin, and dry, smiling dust powdery mouth of Moundshroud. His crossed arms fell loose. Thanks, lad. Free. No fun being wrapped in here like some old funeral gift for the land of the dead. But, quick, boys. Hop up in the niches. Stand still. Stand stiff. Someone's coming. Play mummy, boys. Play dead. The boys leapt up to stand, arms folded, eyes shut. Breaths held like a frieze of small mummies cut in the ancient rock. Easy, whispered Moundshroud. Here comes a funeral procession. An army of mourners in gold and fine silks, bearing small sailing ship toys and copper bowls of food in their hands. And in their midst a mummy case carried light as sunshine on the shoulders of 6 men. And behind that a freshly wrapped mummy with new paintings on its linen vestments, and a small gold mask fitted over its face. See the food, boys, the toys, whispered Moundshroud. They put toys on the tombs, lads, so the gods will come play, romp, roust about, and run children happy to the land of the dead. See the boats, kites, jump ropes, toy knives. But look at the size of the mummy, said Ralph inside his hot linen bandages. It's a 12-year-old boy in there, like me. That gold and that gold mask on the boy's face. Doesn't it look familiar? Pipkin! Cried everyone hoarsely. Psst! Hissed Moundshroud. For the funeral had stopped. The high priests were glancing around through the flickering torch shadows. The boys, high in their niches, squeezed their eyes tight, sucked in their breaths. What a whisper, said Moundshroud, a mosquito in Tom's ear. A murmur. Harp music began to play again. The funeral shuffled on. And in the midst of all the gold and toys, the kites of the dead, there was a small 12-year-old, fresh new mummy with a gold mask that looked just exactly like Pipkin. No, 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 thought Tom. Yes, cried a mouse voice, tiny, lost, wrapped away, kept, trapped, wild. It's me. I'm here, under the mask, under the wrappings. Can't move, can't yell, can't fight free. Pipkin, thought Tom. Wait! Can't help it. Trapped, shouted the small, wee voice trapped in the picture linens. Follow. Meet me. Find me at... The voice faded. The funeral procession had turned a corner and the dark labyrinth was gone. Follow you where, Pipkin? Tom Skelton jumped down from his niche and yelled into the dark. Meet you where? But in that exact moment, Moundshroud, like a chopped tree, fell out of his niche. Bang! He struck the floor. Wait! He cautioned Tom, looking up at him with one eye that looked like a spider caught in its own web. We'll save old Pipkin yet. Slide, does it? Slide and creep, boys. Psst. They helped him up and unwound some of his mummy wrappings, and tiptoed down the long corridor and turned the corner. Holy cow! Whispered Tom. Look! They're putting Pipkin's mummy in the coffin. And in the coffin inside the sarcophagus, Moundshroud supplied the jaw cracker. A coffin in a coffin, lad. Each larger than the last, all done up in hieroglyphs to tell his life story. Pipkin's life? Or whoever Pipkin was this time around, this year, 4,000 years ago. Yeah, whispered Ralph. Look at the pictures on the sides of the coffin. Pipkin's 1 year old, Pipkin 5, Pipkin 10 and running fast, Pipkin in an apple tree, Pipkin pretending to drown in the lake, Pipkin eating his way through a peach orchard. Wait, what's that? Moundshroud watched the busy funeral. They're putting furniture on the tomb for him to use in the land of the dead. Boats, kites, tops to spin, fresh fruits should Pipkin wake 100 years from now, hungry. He'll be hungry, all right. Good grief, look, they're going out. They're closing the tomb. Moundshroud had to grab and hold Tom, for he was jumping up and down in agony. Pipkin's still in there, buried. When do we save him? Later. Long night is young. We'll see Pipkin again, never fear. Then the tomb door slammed shut. The boys yammered and yelled. In the dark, they could hear the scrape and slosh of mortar filling the last cracks and seams as the funeral stones were shoved into place. The mourners went away with their silent harps. Ralph stood in his mummy costume, stunned, watching the last of the shadows go. Is that why I'm dressed like a mummy? He fingered the bandages. He touched his clay-wrinkled, ancient face. And is that what my part of Halloween is all about? All, boy, all. The Egyptians. Why, they built to last. 10,000 years they planned for. Tombs, boys, tombs. Graves, mummies, bones, death, death. Death was at the very heart, gizzard, light, soul, and body of their life. Tombs and more tombs, with secret passages so none might be found. So grave robbers could not borrow souls and toys and you were a mummy, boy, because that was how they dressed for eternity. Spun up in a cocoon of threads, they hoped to come forth like lovely butterflies in some far, dear, loving world. Know your cocoon, boy. Touch the strange stuffs. Why, said Ralph the mummy, blinking at the smoky walls and old hieroglyphs, every day was Halloween to them. Every day, grasped all in admiration. Every day was Halloween for them, too. Moundshroud pointed. The boys turned. A kind of green electric storm simmered in the tomb dungeon. The ground shuddered as with an ancient quake. Somewhere a volcano turned over in its sleep, lighting the walls with one fiery shoulder. And in the walls beyond were prehistoric drawings of cavemen long before the Egyptians. Now, said Moundshroud, lightning struck. Saber-toothed tigers caught cavemen screaming. Tar pits drowned their bones. They sank and wailed. Wait, we'll save a few with fire. Moundshroud blinked. Lightning struck to burn forests. One ape-man, running, seized a branch, burning, and rammed it into a saber-toothed jaws. The tiger shrieked and fell away. The ape-man, snorting in triumph, tossed the fiery branch into a pile of autumn leaves in his cave. Other men came to hold their hands out to the fire, laughing at the night where the yellow beast eyes waited afraid. See, boys, Moundshroud's face flickering with the fire, the days of the long cold are done. Because of this one brave, new-thinking man, summer lives in the winter cave. But, said Tom, what's that got to do with Halloween? Do? Why, blast my bones, everything! When you and your friends die every day, there's no time to think of death, is there? Only time to run. But when you stop running at long last... He touched the walls. The ape-man froze in mid-flight. Now you have time to think where you come from, where you're going. And the fire lights the way, boys. Fire and lightning. Morning stars to gaze at, fire in your own cave to protect you. Only by night's fires was the caveman, beast man, able to last turn his thoughts on a spit and baste them with wonder. The sun died in the sky, winter came on like a great white beast, shaking its fur, burying him. Would spring ever come back to the world? Would the sun be reborn next year or stay murdered? Egyptians asked it, cavemen asked it 1,000,000 years before. Will the sun rise tomorrow morning? And that's how Halloween began? With such long thoughts at night, boys, and always at the center of it, fire. The sun dying down the cold sky forever. Now that must have scared early man, eh? That was the big death. The sun went away forever. And what? So in the middle of autumn, everything dying, ape men turned to their sleep. Remember their own dead of the last year. Ghosts turned in their heads. Memories. That's what ghosts are. But ape men didn't know that. Behind their eyelids, late nights, the memory ghosts called, waved, danced. So ape men woke up, tossed twigs on the fire, shivered and wept. They could drive away wolves, but not memories, not ghosts. So they held tight to their ribs, prayed for spring, watched the fire, and thanked invisible gods for harvests of fruit and nuts. Halloween, indeed. Halloween, indeed. 1,000,000 years ago in a cave in autumn, with ghosts inside heads, and the sun lost. Moundshroud's voice faded. He unraveled another yard or two of mummied wrappings, draped them over his arm grandly, and said, "More to see. Come on, boys." And they walked out of the catacombs into the twilight of the old Egyptian day. A great pyramid lay before them, waiting. "Last one to the top," said Mr. Moundshroud, "is a monkey's uncle." And the monkey's uncle was Tom. Where are we? Chapter 11. We're over halfway done. Like I said, welcome to the stream, Penguin. Good to see you here. Normally I'd be doing video games, but since it being Halloween, let's see, I'm trying to remember the next one. Okay. Grasping, they reached the pyramid's top and waited. A vast crystal lens, viewing glass which spun slowly in the wind on a golden tripod, a gigantic eye with which to bring far places near. In the west, the sun, smothered and dying in clouds, sank, and Moundshroud hooted his delight. "There it goes, boys, the heart, soul, and flesh of Halloween, the sun, where Osiris is murdered again. There sinks Mithras, the Persian fire. There falls Phobos Apollo at all Grecian light. Sun and flame, boys, look and blink. Turn that crystal spyglass. Swing it down the Mediterranean coast 1,000 miles. See the Greek Isles?" "Sure," said plain George Smith, dressed up as a fancy pale ghost. "Cities, towns, streets, houses. People jumping out on porches to bring food." "Yes," Moundshroud beamed. "Their Festival of the Dead. The Feast of Pots. Trick or treat old style, but tricks from the dead if you don't feed them. So treats are laid out in fine banquets on the sill." Far away in the sweet dusk, smells of cooked meats steamed, dishes were dealt out for spirits that smoked across the land and the living. The women and the children of the Grecian homes came and went with multitudinous quantities of spiced and delectable victual. Then, all through the Grecian Isles, doors slammed. The vast slamming echoed along the dark wind. "The temple's shutting tight," said Moundshroud. "Every holy place in Greece will be double locked this night." "And look!" Ralph, who was the mummy, swung the crystal lens. The light flared over the boys' masks. "Those people! Why, they're painting black molasses on their front doorposts." "Pitch," corrected Moundshroud. "Black tar to glue the ghosts. Stick them fast so they can't get inside." "Why?" said Tom. "Why didn't we think of that?" Darkness moved down the Mediterranean shores. From the tombs like mist, the dead spirits shivered in soot and black plumes along the streets, to be caught in the dark tar that smeared the porch sills. The wind mourned as if telling the anguish of the trapped dead. Now Italy, Rome. Moundshroud turned the lens to see Roman cemeteries where people placed food on graves and hurried off. The wind whipped Moundshroud's cape. It hollowed his mouth. "O autumn winds that bake and burn, and all the world to darkness turn, now storm and seize and make of me a swarm of leaves from the autumn's tree." He jumped straight into the air. The boys yelled with delight, even as his clothes, caped, hair, skin, body, corn candy bones tore apart before their eyes. Leaves burn, change, turn. The wind ribboned him into confetti. A million autumn leaves, gold, brown, red as blood, rust, all wild, rustling, simmering, a clutch of oak and maple leaf, a hickory leaf downfall, a toss of flaking whisper, murmur, rustle to the dark river creek sky. Not one kite, but 10,000 tiny mummy flake kites. Moundshroud exploded apart. World turn, leaves burn, grass die, trees fly. And from a billion other trees and autumn lands, leaves rushed to join with the upflung battalions of dry bits that were Moundshroud, dispersed in whirlwinds from which his voice stormed. "Boys, see the fires along the Mediterranean coast. Fires burning forth through Europe, fires of fear, flames of celebration. Would you spy, boys? Up now, fly! And leaves an avalanche upon each boy like terrible flapping moths, and carried them away. Over Egyptian sands they sank and laughed and giggled. Over the strange sea, rapturous and hysterical, they soared. Happy New Year! A voice cried from below. Happy what? Asked Tom. Happy New Year! Moundshroud, a flock of rusty leaves, rustled to his voice. In old times, the 1st of November was New Year's Day, the true end of summer, the cold start of winter. Not exactly happy, but well. Happy New Year. They crossed Europe and saw new water below. The British Isles, whispered Moundshroud. Would you cock an eye at England's own Druid, god of the dead? We would. White as milkweed then, soft as snow, fall, blow away down, each and all. The boys fell like a bushel of chestnuts, their feet rained to earth. Chapter 12. Now the boys, who landed like a downpour of bright autumn trash, were in this order. Tom Skelton, dressed with his delicious bones. Hank Henry, more or less a witch. Ralph Bergstrom, a mummy of an unraveled mummy becoming more unbandaged by the minute. A ghost named George Smith. JJ, no other name needed, a very fine ape man. Wally Babb, who said he was a gargoyle, but everyone said he looked like Quasimodo. Fred Fire, what else but a beggar fresh out of a ditch. And last but not least, Hackles Nibley, who had run up a costume at the last moment by simply grabbing on a white scare mask and grabbing his grandpa's harvest scythe off the garage wall. The garage wall. All the boys being safely landed on English earth, their billions autumn leaves blew off and blew away. They stood in the midst of a vast field of wheat. Here, Master Nibley, I brought you a scythe. Take it, grab. Now lie low, warned Moundshroud, the Druid god of the dead. Samhain, fall! They fell, for a huge scythe came skipping down out of the sky. With its great razor edge, it cut the wind. With its whistling side, it sliced clouds. It beheaded trees, it razored along the cheek of a hill. It made a fresh, clean shave of wheat. In the air, a whole blizzard of wheat fell. With every whisk, every cut, every scythe, the sky was a swarm with cries and shrieks and screams. The scythe hissed up. The boys glowered. "Arrgh!" grunted a large voice. Mr. Moundshroud, is that you? Cried Tom. For towering 40 feet above them in the sky, an immense scythe in his hands, was a cowled figure, its face in midnight fogs. The blade swung down. Hiss! Mr. Moundshroud, let us be! Shut up! Someone knocked Tom's elbow. Mr. Moundshroud lay on the earth beside him. That's not me. That's Samhain! Cried the voice in the fog. God of the dead! I harvest thus, and sow. Swoosh! Those who died this year are here, and for their sins this night are turned to beasts. Swoosh! Please, whispered Ralph the mummy. The scythe zippered Hackles Nibley's spine, ripping his costume in a long tear, knocking his own small scythe free of his hands. Beasts! And the harvest wheat flailed up and spun around in the wind, shrieking its souls. All those who died in the last 12 months rained to earth, and falling, touching their heads of wheat, were turned into asses, chickens, snakes which scurried, cackled, brayed, and were turned to dogs and cats, and cows that barked, cried, and bawled. But all were miniature, all were tiny, small, no bigger than worms, no bigger than toes, no bigger than the sliced off tips of a nose. By hundreds and thousands of the wheat heads snowed and scattered and fell down as spiders which could not shout or beg or weep for mercy, but which soundless raced over the grass, poured over the boys. 100 centipedes tiptoed on Ralph's spine. 200 leeches clung to Hackles Nibley's scythe until the nightmare gasped. He raved and shook them off. Everywhere fell black widows and tiny boa constrictors. For your sins, take that, and this, bellowed the voice in the whistling sky. The scythe flashed, the wind cut, fell in bright thunders. The wheat churned and gave up a million heads. Heads fell, sinners hit like rocks, and hitting they returned to frogs and toads and multitudes of scaly warts, with legs and jellyfish which stank in the light. "I'll be good," prayed Tom. "Let me live," added Henry Hank. All of this said very loudly, for the scythe was making a dreadful roar. It was like an ocean wave falling out of the sky, clearing a beach, and running away up to cut more clouds. Even the clouds seemed to be whispering out swift and more fervent prayers as their own fates. "Not me, not me." "For all the evil you ever did," said Samhain, and the scythe cut, and the souls were harvested and fell in blind newts and awful bedbugs and dreadful cockroaches, to scuttle limp, creep, and scrabble. "My gosh, he's a bug maker, a flea squasher, a snake grinder outer, a roach transformer, a fly keeper. No, Samhain, October god, god of the dead." Samhain stomped a great foot which tread 1,000 bugs in the grass, and tromped 10,000 tiny soul beasts into the dust. "I think," said Tom, "I think it's time we ran," suggested Ralph, not offhanded. "Shall we take a vote?" The scythe hissed, and Samhain boomed. "Vote? Heck with that," said Moundshroud. All jumped up. "You there!" thundered a voice above them. "Come back!" "No, sir, thanks," said one, and then another, and put a right foot after another. "I figure," said Ralph, panting, leaping, tears on his cheeks. "I've been pretty good most of my life. I don't deserve to die." "Ha ha!" shouted Samhain. The scythe came down in a guillotine which chunked the head off an oak tree and felled a maple. A whole orchard of autumn leaves fell into a marble pit somewhere. It sounded like a house full of boys falling downstairs. "I don't think he heard you, Ralph," said Tom. They dived, they fell among the rocks and the shrubs. The scythe ricocheted off the stone. Samhain gave such a yell as brought an avalanche down on a small hill nearby. "Boy," said Ralph, squinched up, balled up, his feet against his chest, eyes tight, "England is no place to be a sinner." Even as a final rain, a shower, a downpour of hysterical souls turned beetle, turned flea, turned stinkbug, turned daddy longlegs, scurried over the boys. "Hey, look! That dog!" A wild dog, mad with terror, raced up the rocks. Its face, its eyes, something in its eyes. "That couldn't be Pipkin?" said everyone. "Pip!" shouted Tom. "Is this where we meet you? But whoom! The scythe fell, and yipping with fright, the dog bowled over and slid down in the grass. "Hold on, Pipkin! We know you! We see you! Don't scare off! Don't—" Tom whistled, but the dog, yipping, yarping, with Pipkin's own dear, sweet, scared voice, was gone. But didn't an echo of his yip came back from the hills? "Meet! Meet me!" Where, thought Tom. Crime and Nitley, where? Chapter 13. I'm going to get more water here in a bit. Samhain's scythe uplifted, gazed all about, happy at his gains. He chuckled a most delicious chuckle, spat fiery spittle on his hoary hands, and clenched the scythe tighter, swung it up, and froze. For somewhere, someone was singing. Somewhere near the top of a hill, in a small clump of trees, a small bonfire flickered. Men like shadows were gathered there, lifting up their arms and chanting. Samhain listened, his scythe like a great smile in his arm. "O Samhain, god of death, hear us. We, the holy Druid priests, in this grove of trees, the great oaks, plead for the souls of the dead." Far away, these strange men, by their bright fire, lifted metal knives, lifted cats and goats in their hands, chanting, "We pray for the souls of those who are turned into beasts. O God of the dead, we sacrifice these beasts, so that you will let free the souls of our loved ones who died this year." The knives flashed. Samhain smiled an even greater smile. The animals shrieked. All around the boys on the earth, the grass, the rocks, the trapped souls lost in spiders, locked in roaches, put away in fleas and pillbugs and centipedes, gabbed and yammered, silent yammered and twitched, and rolled. Tom went. He thought he heard a million small, oh very microscopic bleats of pain and release from around him when the centipedes capered, spiders danced. "Let free, let be," prayed the Druids on the hill. The fire blazed. A sea wind roared over the meadow, brushed the rocks, touched at the spiders, rolled the pillbugs, and tumbled the roaches. The tiny spiders, insects, the miniature dogs and cows fluffed away like a million snowflakes. The tiny souls trapped in insect bodies dissolved. Released with a vast cavern whisper, they whistled up to the sky. "To heaven!" cried the Druid priests. "Oh, free, go!" They flew. They vanished in the air with a great sigh of thanks and much gratitude. Samhain, god of the dead, shrugged, let them go. And then, just as suddenly, he stiffened. As he did, the hidden boys and Mr. Moundshroud crouched in the rocks. Through a valley and across the hill ran an army of Roman soldiers, a troop on the double. Their leader ran before them, shouting, "Soldiers of Rome, destroy the pagans, destroy the unholy religion. Saturninus so orders. For Saturninus!" Samhain in the sky raised his scythe. Too late. The soldiers slammed swords and axes into the bases of the holy Druid oaks. Samhain cried in pain as if the axes had chopped his knees. The holy trees groaned, whistled, and with a final chop, thundered to earth. Samhain trembled in the high air. The Druid priests, fleeing, stopped and shuddered. Trees fell. The priests chopped at the ankles. The knees fell. They were blown over like oaks in a hurricane. "No!" roared Samhain in the high air. "But yes!" cried the Romans. "Now!" His soldiers gave a final mighty blow, and Samhain, god of the dead, torn at his roots, chopped at his ankles, began to fall. The boys, staring up, leapt out of the way, for it was like a giant forest falling all in one fall. They were shadowed by his midnight descent. The thunder of his death came before him. He was the greatest tree in all existence ever, the tallest oak ever to plummet down and die. Down he came through the wild air, screaming, flailing to hold himself up. Samhain hit the earth. He dropped with a roar that shook the bones of the hills and snuffed the holy fires. And with Samhain cut and down and dead, the last of the Druids' oaks fell with him, like a wheat cut with a final scythe. His own huge scythe, a vast smile lost in the fields, dissolved into a puddle of silver and sank into the grass. Silence, smoldering of fires, a blowing of leaves. Instantly, the sun went down. The Druid priests bled in the grass as the boys watched, and the Roman captain prowled the dead fires, kicking the holy ashes. Here we shall build our temples to our gods." The soldiers lit new fires and burned incense before golden idols which they had set in place. But no sooner lit than a star shone in the east. On far desert islands, desert sands, to camel bells, 3 wise men moved. The Roman soldiers lifted their bronze shields against the glare of the star in the sky, but their shields melted. The Roman idols melted and became the shapes of Mary, Son. The soldiers' armors melted, dripped, and changed. They were dressed now in the garments of priests who sang Latin before yet newer altars. Even as Moundshroud, crouched, squinting, weighed the scene and whispered to the small masked friends, "I see, boy. Gods following gods. The Romans cut down the Druids, their oaks, their gods of the dead. Bang, down, and put their own gods, eh? But now the Christians run and cut the Romans down. New altars, boys, new incense, new names." And the wind blew the altar candles out. In the darkness Tom cried out. The earth shuddered and spun. Rain drenched them. What's happened, Mr. Moundshroud? Where are we? Moundshroud stuck a flinty thumb into the fire and held it up. Why, bless me, boys. It's the Dark Ages, the longest, darkest night ever. Christ long since come and gone in the world. And where's Pipkin? Here, cried a voice from the black sky. I think I'm on a broom. It's taking me away. Hey, where to? Said Ralph, and then JJ, and then Hackles Nibley and Wally Bab and all the rest. There was a huge whisper like a gigantic cat stroking its whiskers in the dark. Brooms, muttered Moundshroud. The gathering of the brooms, the October Broom Festival. The annual migration. To where? Asked Tom, calling up from everyone making traffic on the air now in whist streaks. The Broomworks, of course. Help! I'm flying! Said Henry Hank. Whisk! A broom whistled him away. A great brambly cat flashed in Tom's cheek. He felt a wooden pole between his legs. Jump up! Hang on, said Moundshroud. When attacked by a broom, only one thing to do. Hold tight. I'm holding! Cried Tom. Flew away. Where are we? We're in chapter 12? Or chapter 13, something like that. The sky was swept clean with brooms. The sky was yelled clean by boys occupying at least 8 of those brooms at once. And what with changing their cries of fear to cries of delight, the boys almost forgot to look or listen for Pipkin, similarly sailed forth among island clouds. This way, announced Pipkin. As soon as we can, said Tom Skelton. But Pip, it's awful hard to ride a broomstick, I find. Funny you say that, said Henry Hank. I agree. And everyone agreed, falling off, hanging on, and climbing back on. There was now such a hustle of brooms as left no room for clouds, and none for mist, and certainly none for fog or boys. There was an immense traffic jam of brooms, as if all the earth's forests gave up their branches in one broom and flung in scouring autumn fields, cut clean and throttled tight such cereal grains as made good sweepers, thrashers, beaters. They flew up. So here came all the backyard waistline prop poles in the world, and came with them swatches of grass, clumps of weed, brambles of bush, to herd the sheep clouds and cleanse the stars and ride the boys. Said boys, each with his own skinny mount, were deluged with beatings and cuffings of flail and wood. They were punished severely for occupying heaven. They took 100 bruises each, a dozen cuts, precisely 49 lumps on their tender skulls. Hey, I got a bloody nose, gasped Tom, happily looking at the red on his fingers. Shucks, cried Pipkin, going into a cloud dry and coming out wet. That's nothing. I got one eye shut, one ear bad, and I lost a tooth. Pipkin, cried Tom, why don't you keep telling us to meet you, and then we don't know where? Where? In the air, said Pipkin. Jeez, muttered Henry Hank. That's 2,100,000,099,000,000 acres of air wrapped around the world. Which half acre does Pipkin mean? I mean, gasped Pipkin. But a whole bundle of broomsticks banged up in a kimbo dance like a shuttle of cornstalks crosses flight, or a farmland fence suddenly come attic in its frenzies. A cloud with a grand fiend face gaped its mouth. It swallowed Pipkin's broom and all, and then shut its vapors tight and rumbled with Pipkin indigestion. Kick your way out, Pipkin! Stomp him in the stomach, someone suggested. But nothing kicked, and the clouds, satisfied, sailed on Forever's bay towards eternity's dawn, ruminating over its delicious, sweet boy dinner. Meet him in the air, Tom snorted. Good grief! Talk about horrible directions to nowhere. See even more horrible directions, said Moundshroud, sailing by on a broom that looked like a wet and angry cat on the end of a mop. Would you see witches, boys, hags, crones, conjure wives, magicians, black magics, demons, devils? There they be, in mobs and riots, boys, skin your eyeballs. And there below, all across Europe, through France and Germany and Spain, on the night roads were indeed clusters and mobs of parades of strange sinners running north, scrabbling away from the southern sea. That's it! Jump! Run! This way into the night! This way into the dark! Moundshroud stooped low, shouting over the mobs like a general leading a fine evil troop. Quick hide! Lie low! Wait a few centuries! Hide out from what? Tom wondered. Here come the Christians! Yelling voices below on the roads. And that was the answer. Tom blinked and soared and watched. And from all the roads, the mobs ran to stand alone on farms, or at crossroads or harvest fields and towns. Old men, old women, toothless and raving, yelling to the sky as the broom swept down. Why, said Henry Hank, stunned. Those are witches. Dry clean, my soul, and hanging out if not. Yeah, dry clean, my soul, and hanging out to dry if you're not right, my boy, agreed Moundshroud. There are witches jumping fires, said J.J. And witches stirring cauldrons, said Tom, and witches drawing symbols on farmyard dust. Are they real? I mean, I always thought real. Moundshroud, insulted, almost fell from his bramblecat broom. Ye little gods and fishes, lad. Every town has its resident witch. Every town hides some old Greek pagan priest, some Roman worshipper of tiny gods who ran up the roads, hid in culverts, and sank in caves to escape the Christians. In every tiny village, boy, and every Scrabble farm, the old religions hide out. You saw the Druids cut and chopped, eh? They hid from the Romans. Now the Romans, who fed Christians to lions, run themselves to hide. So all the little lollygagging colts, all flavors and types, scramble to survive. See how they run, boys? And it was true. Fires burned all over Europe. At every crossroad and by every haystack, dark forms jumped in cat-cross flames. Cauldrons bubbled, old hags cursed, dogs frolicked red-hot coals. Witches! Witches everywhere, said Tom, amazed. I never knew there were so many. Mobs and multitudes, Tom. Europe has flooded to the dikes. Witches underfoot, every bed in the cellars and the high attics. Oh boy, said Henry Hank, proud in his witch costume. Real witches. Could they talk to the dead? No. Jump up devils? No. Keep demons in door hinges and squeal them out at midnight? No. Ride broomsticks? No. Put sneezing spells on people? Sorry. Kill folks by sticking pins in the dolls? No. What the heck could they do? Nothing. Nothing? Cried all the boys, affronted. Oh, they thought they could, boys. Moundshroud led the team down on their brooms over the farms, where witches dropped frogs in cauldrons and stomped toads and snuffed mummy dust from and cavorted in cackles. But stop and think. What does the word witch truly mean? Why, said Tom, he was stymied. Wits, said Moundshroud. Intelligence. That's all it means. Knowledge. So any man or woman with half a brain and with inclinations towards learning had his wits about him, eh? And so, anyone too smart, who didn't watch out, was called a witch. And some of the smart ones, the ones with wits, pretended at magic, or dreamt themselves with ghosts and dead snufflers and ambling mummies. And if enemies dropped dead by coincidence, they took the credit for it. They liked to believe they had power, but they had none, boys, none. Sad and sorry, 'tis true. But listen, there beyond the hill, that's where the brooms come from. That is where they go. The boys listened and heard. The broom works makes the broom that looms on sky and gloom and rising of the moon. That broom which, broom to witch, flies high on harvestings of storm-wind grass, with shriek and sigh to motion it, an ocean seas of cloud, now soft, now loud. Below a full tilt, a wide witch broom factory was filled with commotions, poles being cut and bound with broom bushes, which no sooner tied, took off up chimneys in flights of sparks. On rooftops, hags leapt on to ride the stars. Or so it seemed, as the boys watched and the voices sang. Did witches feel the night wind in their bed and reel and dance with devils in the dead? No, but that is what they bragged and claimed and said. Until whole continents hell-bent named witches of the innocent, and did conspire to burn old women, babes, and virgins in a fire. Mobs raved through villages and farms with torches cursing. Bonfires flared from the English Channel to the Mediterranean shore. Through all of Germany and France, 10,000 so-called evil witches hung to kick their final antic dance. No village but what shared a dreadful uproar, as each side named the other for a devil's pig, old Satan Sal, the demon's maddened boar. Wild pigs with witches glued to their backs trotted tortiles, flinting sparks and snorting steams. All Europe was a cloud of witches' smoke, their judges often bound and burned with them. For what? A joke. Until all men are spoiled with guilt, all sin, all lie. So what to do? Why everyone must die! Smoke churned to the sky at every crossroad. Witches hung, crows gathered in a feathered darkness. The boys hung from their brooms in the sky, eyes popped, mouths wide. Anyone want to be a witch? Asked Moundshroud at last. Said Henry Hank, shivering in his witch's rags. Not me. No fun, eh, boy? No fun. The brooms flew them off through chars and smokes. They landed in an empty street, an open place. Paris. Their brooms fell over, dead. Next chapter. Welcome back. We're plowing through this. We're on page 69 of 105. Let's see. Well now, boys. What should we do to scare the scarers, frighten the frighteners, and shiver the shiverers? Asked Moundshroud inside a cloud. What's bigger than demons and witches? Bigger gods? Bigger witches? Bigger churches? Tom guessed. Phrasing. Bless you, Tom, right. An idea gets big, yes. A religion gets big. How? With buildings, large enough to cast shadows across an entire land. Build buildings you can see for 100 miles. Build one so tall and famous it has a hunchback in it, ringing bells. So now, boys, build me. Help me build it, brick by brick, flying buttress by flying buttress. Let's build Notre Dame, shouted 8 boys. And all the more reason to build Notre Dame, because, said Moundshroud, listen. Bong! A bell tolled in the sky. Bong! Help! Whispered a voice when the sound had died. Bong! The boys looked and saw a kind of scaffolding reared up, a half belfry kept upon the moon. At the very top hung a huge bronze bell that was now tolling inside. And from inside that bell, with every crash and bang and gong, a small voice shouted, Help! The boys looked at Moundshroud, their eyes blazed a question. Pipkin? Meet me in the air, thought Tom. And there he is! There, hung upside down over Paris, his head for a knocker, was Pipkin and a bell. Or the shadow, ghost, or lost spirit of Pipkin, anyway. Which is to say, there was a bell, and when it sounded the hour, why, that sound was made in a flesh and blood clapper, which knocked the rim. Pipkin's head banged the bell, bong, and again, bong. Knock his brains out, gasped Henry Hank. Help! Cried Pipkin, a shadow in the bell, a ghost chained upside down to strike the quarters and the hours. Fly! cried the boys to their brooms, but the brooms lay dead on the Paris stones. No life in them, warned Moundshroud. Juice, sap, and fire all gone. Well now, how do we get up to help Pipkin with no broom? You fly, Mr. Moundshroud. Ah, no, that's not the ticket. You must save him always and forever, again and again this night until one grand salvation. Wait! Ah, inspiration. We were going to build Notre Dame, correct? Well then, let us by all means build it. There. And climbing out of our way up to Hard Skull, knock the bell, sound the hour, Pipkin. Hop it, lads, climb those stairs. What stairs? These! Here, here, and here! Bricks fell into place. The boys leapt, and as they put a foot up and out and down, a stair came under it, one stone at a time. Bong, said the bell. Help, said Pipkin. Feet galloping, empty air came down to tap, rustle, and clomp on a step. Another step, and yet another, and another, climbing empty space. Help, said Pipkin. Bong! Again went the hollow bell. So they ran on emptiness, with Moundshroud prodding, shoving after. They ran on purely windy light, only to have bricks and stones and mortar shuffle like cards, deal themselves solid, take form beneath their toes and heels. It was like racing up through a cake that built itself layer on stone layer, and Wild Bell and sad Pipkin shouting and pleading them on. Our shadow, there it is, said Tom. And indeed, the shadow of this cathedral, this splendid Notre Dame, was tossed by moonlight all across France and half of Europe. Up, boys, up! No pause, no rest, run! Bong! Help! They ran. They began to fall with each step, but again and again, steps came up and placed and saved them, and ran them taller, so the shadow of the spires loomed tall across rivers and fields, to snuff the last witch fires at crossroads. Crones, hags, wise men, demon lovers, 1,000 miles off, snuffed like candles, whiffed to smoke, wailed and sank to hide as the church leaned and tilted across the heavens. Even as the Romans cut down Druid trees and chopped their gods of the dead to fall, we now with this church, boys, cast such a shadow as knocks all witches off their stilts, and puts seedy sorcerers and trite magicians to heel. No more small witch fires, only this great lit candle, Notre Dame. Presto! Thank you for the follow there, Uncle Penguin. The boys laughed with delight. The last step fell into place as they reached the top, gasping. Notre Dame Cathedral was finished, built. Bong! The last soft hour was struck. The great bronze bell shuddered and hung empty. The boys leaned to peer into its cavernous mouth. There was no clapper inside shaped like Pipkin. Pipkin? They whispered. Kin? Echoed the bell in a small echo. He's here somewhere. Up in the air. Meet him. That's what he promised. Pipkin falls back on no promises. Look about you, boys. Fine handiwork, eh? Centuries of toil done in a fast gallop and a sneeze, right? There's something beside Pipkin's missing. What? Glance up, scan around, eh? The boys peered, puzzled. Don't the place look awful plain, boys? Awful untouched and unornamented? Gargoyles! Everyone turned to look at Wally Bob, who was dressed as a gargoyle for Halloween. His face fairly beamed with revelation. Gargoyles! The place has got no gargoyles! Gargoyles! Moundshroud uttered and undulated with a beautifully ribboned word with his lizardly tongue. Gargoyles! Shall we put them on, boys? How? Why, I should think we would whistle them in place. Whistle for demons, boys, whistles for fiends. Give a high, great tooting blow for beasties and ferocious fanged loomers of the dark. Wally Bab sucked in a great breath. Here's mine! He whistled, all whistled, and the gargoyles, they came running. The unemployed of all midnight Europe shivered in their cold stone sleep and came awake. which is to say that all of the old beasts, all of the old tales, all of the old nightmares, all the old unused demons put by, and witches left in the lurch, quaked at the call, reared at the whistle, trembled in the summons, and in dust devils of propulsion skimmed down the roads, flitted skies, buckshot through scraven trees, forded streams, swam rivers, pierced clouds, and arrived, which is still to say that all the dead statues and idols and semi-gods and demigods of all Europe, lying like a beautiful snow all about, abandoned in ruins, gave a blink, started, and came as salamanders on the road, or bats in the skies, or dingoes in the brush. They flew, they galloped, they skittered, to the great excitement and amazement of much babbling, shouting from the fringing of boys leaning out, Moundshroud leaning with them as the mobs of strange beasts came from north, south, east, west to panic at the gates and wait for whistles. Shall we drop white hot boiling lead down on them? The boys saw Moundshroud smile. Heck no, said Tom. Hunchback already did that years ago. Well then, no burning lava. Shall we whistle them up? They all whistled, and obedient to summons, the mobs, the flocks, the prides, the crush, the collection, the ravening flux of monsters, beasts, vices, rampant virtues gone sour, discarded saints, misguided prides, hollow pomps, oozed, slid, suckered, pelted, ran, bowled, and right up the sides of Notre Dame. In a flood tide of nightmare and a tidal wave of outcry and shamble, they inundated the cathedral to crust themselves on every pinion and upthrust stone. So here ran pigs, where they climbed Satan's goats. So here ran pigs, and there climbed Satan's goats, and yet another wall knew devils which carved themselves along the wall, dropped horns and grew new ones, shaved beards to sprout tendrils, earthworm mustaches. Sometimes a swarm of only masks and faces scuttled up the walls and took the buttress heights, carried by an army of crayfish and wobbly, crotchety lobsters. Here came the heads of gorillas, full of sin and teeth. There came men's heads with sausages in their mouths. Beyond danced the mask of a fool upheld by a spider that knew ballet. So much was going on that Tom said, My gosh, so much is going on! And more to come. There, said Moundshroud. And now that Notre Dame was infested with various beasts and spidering leers and gloams and masks, why, here came dragons chasing children, and whales swallowing Jonah, and chariots chock full of skulls and bones. Acrobats and tumblers, yanked out of shape by demi-demons, limped and fell in strange postures to freeze on the roof. All accompanied by pigs with harps and sows with piccolos and dogs playing bagpipes, so the music itself helped charm and pull new mobs of grotesques up the walls to be trapped and caught forever in sockets of stone. Here an ape plucked a lyre, there floundered a woman with a fish's tail. Now a sphinx flew out of the night and shed its wings and became woman and lion, half and half, settled to snooze away the centuries in the shadow and sound of high bells. What are those? Cried Tom. Moundshroud, leaning over, gave a snort. Those are sins, boys, and nondescripts. There crawls the worm of conscience. They looked to see it crawl, and it crawled very fine. Now, whispered Moundshroud softly, settle, slumber, sleep. And the flocks of strange creatures turned about 3 times like evil dogs and lay down. All beasts took root, all grimaces froze to stone, all cries faded. The moon shadowed and lit the gargoyles of Notre Dame. Does it make sense, Tom? Sure. All the old gods, all the old dreams, all the old nightmares, all the old ideas with nothing to do, out of work, we gave them work. We called them here. Yeah, we called them here. And here they will remain for centuries, right? Right! They looked down over the rim. There was a mob of beasts on the eastern battlement, a crowd of sins on the west, a surge of nightmares on the south, and a fine scuttle of unnamed vices and ill-kept virtues to the north. I, said Tom, proud of the night's work, I wouldn't mind living here. The wind crooned in their mouths of the beasts, their fangs hissed and whistled. Much thanks. Jehoshaphat, said Tom Skelton on the parapet. We whistled all the stone griffins and demons here. Now Pipkin's lost again. I was thinking, why can't we whistle him? Moundshroud laughed.
Great kid! Don't get cocky!
Thank you for those bits there. Moundshroud laughed so his cape boomed on the night wind, and his dry bones jangled inside of his skin. Boys, look around! He's still here! Where? Here, mourned a small, faraway voice. The boys cricked their spines looking over the parapet and cracked their necks staring up. Look and find, lads, hide and seek. And even in seeking, they could not help but enjoy once more the turbulent states of the cathedral, all fringed with horrors and devilishly ugly with trapped beasts. Where was Pipkin among all the dark sea creatures with gills gaped open like mouths for an eternal gasp and sigh? Where among all those lovely chiseled nightmares cut from the gallstones of night lurks and monsters cracked out of old quakes, vomited up from mad volcanoes which cooled themselves to frights and deliriums? Here, wailed a small, far, familiar figure. And down again on a ledge, halfway to the earth, the boys, squinting, thought they saw one small, round, beautiful angel devil face with a familiar eye, familiar nose, a friendly and familiar laugh. Pipkin! Shouting, they ran down the stairways, long, dark corridors, until they reached a ledge. Far out there on the windy air, above a narrow ledge walkway, indeed, was a small face, lovely among such ugliness. Tom went first, not looking down. Spread eagling himself, Ralph followed, and the rest inched along a line. Watch out, Tom, don't fall. I'm not falling. Here's Pip. And there he was, standing in a line directly under the outthrust stone mask, the bust and head of a gargoyle. They looked up at the mighty fine profile, that great nub nose, that unbearded cheek, the fuzzy cap of marbled hair. Pipkin. Pip, for cryie, what are you doing here? Pip said nothing. His mouth was cut stone. It's just rock. Just a gargoyle carved here a long time ago. It looks like Pipkin. No, I heard him call, but how? And the wind gave them the answer. It blew around the high corners of Notre Dame, it flouted the ears and piped out the gaping mouths of the gargoyles. Ah, whispers Pipkin's voice. Their hair stood up on the backs of their necks. Oh, murmured the stone mouth. Listen, there it is, said Ralph excitedly. Shut up, cried Tom. Pip, next time the wind blows, tell us, how do we help? What got you here and how do we get you down? Silence. The boys clung to the rock cliff face of the great cathedral. Then another swoop of wind sucked by, drawing their breaths. And whistled the carved stone boy's teeth. One, said Pip's voice. Question, whispered Pip's voice again after the pause. Silence. More wind. Had a time. One question at a time, translated Tom. The boys hooted with laughter. That was Pip, all right. Okay, Tom gathered his spit. What are you doing up here? The wind blew sadly, and the voice spoke as from deep old wells. And so many places. Just a few hours. The boys waited, grinding their teeth. Speak up, Pipkin! The wind came back to mourn the open stone mouth, but the wind had died. It began to rain. This was best of all, for the raindrops ran cold on Pipkin's skin, in his ears and out along his nose, and fountained from his marble mouth, so that he began to utter syllables in liquid tongues, with clear, cold rainwater words. Hey, this is better. He sprouted mist. He sprayed quick rain. Should have been where I had been. Gosh, I was buried for a mummy. I was trapped for a dog. We guessed that was you, Pipkin. And now here, said the rain in the ear, rain in the nose, the rain in the clear dripping marble mouth. My gosh, funny, strange, inside of this rock with all these devils and demons for pals. And then, 10 minutes from now, who knows where I'll be? Higher up or buried deep? Where, Pipkin? The boys jostled. The rain squalled and beat them so they almost tilted and fell off the ledge. Are you dead, Pipkin? No, not yet, said the cold rain in his mouth. Part of me in a hospital, a long way off home. Part of me in that old Egyptian tomb. Part of me in the grass in England. Part of me here. Part of me in a worse place. Where? I don't know. I don't. Gosh, 1 minute I'm yelling laughs, the next I'm scared. Now, just now, this very minute. I guess I know I'm scared. Help me, guys. Help, oh, please. Rain poured out of his eyes like tears. The boys reached up to touch Pipkin's cheek as best they could, but before they could touch it, a lightning bolt struck out of the sky. It flashed blue and white. The entire cathedral shook. The boys had to grab demon's horns and angel wings on either side so as not to be knocked off. Thunder and smoke and a great scattering of rock and stone. Pipkin's face was gone, knocked off by the lightning bolt. It fell down through space to shatter on the ground below. Pipkin! But below on the cathedral porch stones were only flinty fire sparks blowing away and a fine gargoyle dust. Nose, chin, stone, lip, hard cheek, bright eye, carved fine ear, all whipped away on the wind and chaff and shrapnel dust. They saw something like a spirit smoke, a bloom of gunpowder, blow drifting south and west. Mexico, shouted Moundshroud, one of the few men in all the world who knew how to utter that one word. Mexico? Asked Tom. The last grand travel of this night, said Moundshroud, still savoring the syllable. Whistle, boys, scream like tigers, cry like panthers, shriek like a carnivore. Scream? Cry? Shriek? Reassemble the kite, lads, the kite of autumn! Paste back the fangs and fiery eyes and bloody talons. Yell the wind to sew it all together and ride us high and long and last. Bray, boys, whimper, trumpet, and shout! The boys hesitated. Moundshroud ran along the ledge like someone racketing a picket fence. He knocked each boy with his knee and elbow. The boys fell, and falling gave each his particular whimper, shriek, or scream. Plummeting down through cold space, they felt the tail of a murderous peacock flourish beneath. All blood-filled eye, 10,000 burning eyes came up, hovered suddenly around a windy corner of gargoyles. The autumn kite, freshly reassembled, broke their fall. They grabbed, they held to the rim, to the edge, to cross struts, to trap drum, rattling papers to bits and tatters and shreds of old meat breath, lion mouth, and stale blood tiger maw. Moundshroud leapt up to grab. This time he was the tail. The autumn kite hovered, waiting, 8 boys upon its billowing surf of teeth and eyes. Moundshroud turned his ear. Hundreds of miles away, beggars ran down Irish roads, starving, asking for food from door to door. Their cries rose in the night. Fred Fryer in his beggar costume heard. No way! Let's fly there! No time. Listen! Thousands of miles away, there was a faint hammer tapping of death watch beetles ticking the night. The coffin makers of Mexico, Moundshroud smiled. In the streets with their long boxes and nails and little hammers. Tapping. Pipkin? Whispered the boys. We hear, said Moundshroud. And to Mexico we go. The autumn kite boomed them one away in a 1,000-foot tidal wave of wind. The gargoyles, fluttering in their stone nostrils, gaping their marble lips, used the same wind to wail them a farewell. Next chapter. They hung above Mexico. They hung above an island, lake, Mexico. They heard dogs barking in the night far below. They saw a few boats in the moonlight, lake moving like water insects. They heard a guitar playing and a man singing with a high, sad voice. Long way off across the dark borders of land in the United States, packs of children, mobs of dogs ran laughing, barking, knocking from door to door, their hands full of sweet bags of treasure, wild with joy on Halloween night. But here, whispered Tom. Hear what? Asked Moundshroud, hovering at his elbow. Why here? Down through all of South America. Yes, south. Here and south, all the cemeteries, all the graveyards are full of candlelight, Tom thought. 1,000 candles in the cemetery, 100 candles in that graveyard, 10,000 small flickering lights farther in 100 miles, 5,000 miles down to the very tip of Argentina. Is that the way they celebrate El Dia de los Muertos? How's your grade school Spanish, Tom? The Day of the Dead Ones? Caramba, si! Kite, disassemble! Swooping down, the kite flew apart for a final time. The boys tumbled on the stony shore of the quiet lake. Mists hung above the waters. Far across the lake they could see an unlit tomb. There were, as yet, no candles burning in it. Out of the mists, a dugout canoe moved silently without oars, as if the tide touched it across the waters. A tall figure in a gray, winding sheet stood motionless in one end of the boat. The boat nudged the grassy shore softly. The boys gasped, for, as far as they could tell, only darkness was kept inside the hood of the shrouded figure. Mr. Moundshroud? They knew it to be him, but he said nothing. Only the faintest firefly of a grin flicked with the cow. A bony hand gestured. The boys tumbled into the boat. Shh, whispered a voice from the empty. The dark figure gestured again, and touched by the wind, they blew across the dark waters into the night sky, filled with a billion never-before-seen fires of stars. Far off in the dark island, there was a prickle of guitar sound. A single candle was lit in the graveyard. Somewhere, someone blew a musical sound on a flute. Another candle was lit among the tombstones. Someone sang a single word of a song. A third candle was touched to life by a flaming match. And the faster the boat moved, the more guitar notes sounded, the more candles were lit high among the mounds and the stony hills. 12, 100, 1,000 candles flared until all looked as if the great Andromeda star cluster had fallen out of the sky and tilled itself to rest here in the middle of an almost midnight Mexico. The boat struck the shore. The boys, surprised, fell out. They spun about, but Moundshroud was gone. Only his winding sheet lay empty in the boat. A guitar called to them. A voice sang to them. A road like a river of white stones and white rocks led up through the town that was like a graveyard to the graveyard that was like a town. For there were no people in the town. The boys reached the low wall of the graveyard, and then the huge lacework iron gates. They took hold of the iron rungs and stared in. Why, gasped Tom, I've never seen the like. For now they knew why the town was empty, because the graveyard was full. By every grave was a woman kneeling to place gardenias or azaleas or marigolds on a frame of stone. By every grave knelt a daughter who was lighting a new candle or lighting a candle that had just blown out. By every grave was a quiet boy with bright brown eyes, and in one hand a small papier-mâché funeral parade glued to a shingle, and in the other hand a papier-mâché skeleton head, which rattled with rice or nuts inside. Look, whispered Tom. There were hundreds of graves, there were hundreds of women, there were hundreds of daughters, and there were hundreds of sons, and hundreds upon thousands of candles. The whole graveyard was one swarm of candle shine, as if a population of fireflies had heard of a grand conglomeration and had flown here to settle in and flame upon the stones and light the brown faces and the dark eyes and the black hair. Boy, said Tom half to himself, at home we never go to the graveyard, except maybe Memorial Day. Once a year, and then at high noon, full sun. No fun. Now this is fun. Sure, whisper yelled everyone. Mexican Halloweens are better than ours. For on every grave were plates of cookies shaped like funeral priests or skeletons or ghosts, waiting to be nibbled at by living people? Or by ghosts that might come along towards dawn, hungry and forlorn. No one knew. No one said. And each boy inside the graveyard, next to his sister and mother, put down the miniature funeral on the grave. And they could see the tiny candy person inside the tiny wooden coffin placed before the altar. Excuse me. Before the tiny altar with the tiny candles. And all around the tiny coffins stood tiny altar boys with peanuts for heads and eyes painted on the peanut shells. And before the altar stood a priest with a corn nut for a head and a walnut for a stomach. And on the altar was a photograph of the person in the coffin. A real person once, remembered now. Better and better, whispered Ralph. Chevos, sang a far voice up the hill. Inside the graveyard voices echoed the song. Leaning against the graveyard walls with some guitars in their hands or bottles were men of the village. Chevos de los Muertos, sang the faraway voice. Chevos de los Muertos, sang the men in the shadows inside the gate. Skulls, translated Tom. The skulls of the dead. Skulls. Sweet sugar skulls, sweet candy skulls, skulls of the dead ones, sang the voice, coming closer now. And down the hill, treading softly in shadow, came a hunchback vendor of skulls. No, not hunched, said Tom half aloud. A whole load of skulls on his back, cried Ralph. Sweet skulls, sweet white sugar skull candy skulls, sang the vendor, his face hidden under a vast sombrero, but it was Moundshroud's voice that was sweetly piped. And carried from a long bamboo over his shoulder, hung on a black threads, were dozens of scores of sugar skulls, as bright as their own heads. As big as their own heads, and each skull was inscribed. Names, names, sang the old vendor. Tell me your name, I give you your skull. Tom, said Tom. The old man plucked forth a skull. On it, huge letters was written, Tom. Tom took out his own name, his own sweet edible skull in his fingers. Ralph! And a skull with the name Ralph written on it was tossed forth. Ralph caught it, laughing. In a swift game, the bony hand tossed white skull after skull sweetly into the cool air. Henry Hank! Fred! George! Ackles! JJ! Wally! The boys bombarded, squealed, danced about, pelted with their own skulls and their own proud names, sugar encrusted upon each white brow of those skulls. They caught and almost dropped the splendid bombardment. They stood, mouths wide, staring at the sugary death sweets in their gummy hands. And from within the graveyard, way high, male soprano voices sang, Roberto, Maria, Conchita, Toma, Calavera, Calavera, sweet candy bones to eat. Your name on the snow-white sweet skull. You hurry down the street. You buy from the piled high white hills in the square. Buy and eat, chew your name. What a treat! The boys lifted the sweet skulls in their fingers. Bite the T and the O and the M, Tom. Chew the H, swallow the A, and digest the N. Choke on the K, Hank. Their mouths watered. But was it poison they held? Would you guess such happiness, such joy? As each boy dines on darkness and makes a meal of the night. What delight! Snap a bite. Go ahead. Munch that fine candy head. The boys tapped the sweet candy names to their lips and were about to bite when, Olé! A mob of Mexican boys ran up, yelling their names and seizing at skulls. Toma! And Tom saw Toma run off with the named skull. Hey, said Tom, he sort of looked like me. Did he? Said the vendor of skulls. Enrique! Shouted a small Indian boy, seizing Henry Hank's skull. Enrique pelted down the hill. He looked like me. He did, said Moundshroud. Quick, boys, see what they're up to. Hold on to your sweet craniums and get! The boys jumped. For at the very moment an explosion hit the street below, in the town, then another explosion, and then another. Fireworks! For at the very moment the boys took a last look at the flowers, the graves, cookies, foods, skull upon graves, miniature funerals with miniature bodies and coffins at candles, crouched women, lonely boys, girls, men, and then whirled and exploded down the hill towards the firecrackers. Into the plaza, Tom and Ralph and all the other costume boys raced, panting. They jolted to a halt and danced around as 1,000 miniature firecrackers banged around their shoes. The lights were on. Suddenly, the shops were open. And Tomas and Jose Juan and Enrique were lighting and tossing the firecrackers with yells. Hey, Tom, from me, Tomas! Tom saw his own eyes glinting from the wild boy's face. Hey, Henry, this is from Enrique! Bang! JJ, this, bang, is from Jose Juan. This is the best Halloween of all, said Tom. For it was. For never in all their wild travels had so much happened to be seen, smelled, and touched. And every alley and door and window were mounds of sugar skulls with beautiful names. From every alley came the tap-tap of death-watch, beetle coffin making, nailing, hammering, and tapping coffin lids like wooden drums at night. On every corner were stacks of newspapers with pictures of the mayor and his body painted in like a skeleton, or the president and his body all bones, or the loveliest maiden dressed like a xylophone, and death playing a tune on her musical ribs. Calavera, calavera, calavera. The song drifted down the hill. See the politicians buried in the news, rest in peace beneath their names. Such is fame. See the skeletons juggling, standing high, on each other's soldiers, preaching sermons, wrestling, playing soccer. Little runners, little jumpers, little skeletons that leap about and fall. Did you ever dream that death could be whittled down so very small? And the song was true. Wherever the boys looked, there were miniature acrobats, trapeze performers, basketball players, priests, jugglers, tumblers, but all were skeletons, hand to hand, bony shoulder to shoulder, and all small enough for you to carry in your fingers. All over in the window. And over there in a window was a whole microscopic jazz band with a skeleton trumpeter and a skeleton dreamer, and a skeleton playing a tuba no bigger than a soup spoon, and a skeleton conductor with bright cap on his head and a baton in his hand, and tiny music pouring out of the tiny horns. Never before had the boys seen so many bones. Bones, laughed everyone. Oh, lovely bones. The song began to fade. Hold the dark holiday in your palms. Bite it, swallow it, and survive. Come out of the far black tunnel of El Dia de la Muerta and be glad, so glad you are alive. Calavera, calavera. The newspapers, bordered in black, blew away on white funerals to the wind. The Mexican boys ran away up the hill to their families. Oh, strange, funny, strange, whispered Tom. What? Said Ralph, at his elbow. Up in Illinois, we've forgotten what it's all about. I mean the dead, up in our town. Tonight. Heck, they're forgotten. Nobody remembers. Nobody cares. Nobody goes to sit and talk to them. Boy, that's lonely. That's really sad. But here, why shucks, it's both happy and sad. It's all firecrackers and skeleton toys down here in the plaza, and up in the graveyard now are all the Mexican dead folks with their families visiting, and flowers and candles and singing and candy. I mean, it's almost like Thanksgiving, huh? And everyone sat down to dinner, but only half the people able to eat. But that's no mind, they're there. It's like holding hands at a seance with your friends, but some of the friends are gone. Oh, heck, Ralph. Yeah, said Ralph, nodding behind his mask. Heck. Oh, look here, said JJ. The boys looked. On top of a mound of white sugar skulls, one with the name Pipkin on it. Pipkin's sweet skull. But nowhere in all the explosions and dancing bones and flying skulls was there so much as one dust speck or whimper or shadow of Pip. They had grown so accustomed to Pip's leading up the fantastic surprises on the sides of Notre Dame, or weighed down in a gold sarcophagi, or on the they had all expected him, a jack-in-the-box, to pop from a mound of sugar skulls, flapped sheets in their faces, and cried dirges. But no, suddenly, no Pip. No Pip at all. Maybe no Pip ever again. The boys shivered. The cold wind blew fog up from the lake. What are you doing? Are you doing it again, machine? That was the end of that chapter. But it's doing the whole thing where it's like, oh, wait. The machine! Give me a second, guys. It looks like it's doing the whole thing again. Okay. Too much porn. Yeah, it's getting clogged by all the porn. Sign in. Apparently, if you don't watch it, if you don't do enough, it decides, oh, wait, you aren't signed in anymore. Well, you remember the page we were on. Chapter 19. Along the dark night street, around a corner, came a woman, bearing over her shoulders twin scoops of mounded charcoal, burning. From these heaps of pink burning coals, firefly sparks scattered and blew in the wind. Where she passed on bare feet, she left a trail of little sparks which died. Without a word, shuffling, she went around another corner into an alley. After her came a man carrying on his head, lightly, a small coffin. It was a box made of plain white wood nailed shut. On the sides and on top of the box were pinned cheap silver rosettes, handmade silk, and paper flowers inside. Inside the box was. The boys stared as the funeral parade of two went by. Two, thought Tom. The man in the box. Yes, the thing inside the box. The man, his face solemn, balancing the coffin on top of his head, walked tallly into the nearby church. Stuttered Tom. Was that Pip again? Inside the box? What do you think, lad? Asked Moundshroud. I don't know, cried Tom. I only know I had enough. The night's been too long. I've seen too much. I know everything. Gosh, everything. Yeah, said everyone, clustering close, shivering. We've got to get home, don't we? What about Pipkin? Where is he? Is he alive or dead? Can we save him? Is he lost? Are we too late? What do we do? What? Cried everyone, and the same question flew and burst from their mouths and welled in their eyes. They all took hold of Moundshroud as if to press the answer from him and yank it from his elbows. What do we do? To save Pipkin. One last thing. Look up in this tree. Dangling from the tree were a dozen Halloween pinatas. Devils, ghosts, skulls, witches swayed in the wind. Break your pinatas, boys. Sticks were thrust into their hands. Strike! Yelling, they struck. The pinatas exploded. And from the skeleton pinata, 1,000 small skeleton leaves fell in a shower. They swarmed on Tom. The wind blew skeletons and leaves and Tom away. And from the mummy pinata fell hundreds of frail Egyptian mummies which rustled away into the sky, and Ralph with them. And so each boy struck and cracked and let down small, vignant, dancing images of himself, so that devils, witches, ghosts shrieked and seized, and all the boys and leaves went tumbling through the sky, with Moundshroud laughing after. They ricocheted in the final alleys of the town. They banged and skipped like stones across the lake waters to land, rolling in a jumble of knees and elbows on a yet further uphill. They sat up. They found themselves in the middle of an abandoned graveyard with no people, no lights, only stones like immense wedding cakes, frosted with old moonlight. As they watch, Moundshroud, landing light on his feet in a swift, quiet motion, bent. He reached for an iron rung in the earth. He pulled, and with a shriek of hinges, a trapdoor in the earth gaped wide. The boys came to stand at the edge of the hole. Catacombs? Catacombs, Moundshroud. The stairs led down to a dry dust earth. The boys swallowed hard. Is Pip down there? Go bring him up, boys. Is he alone down there? No. Things are with him. Things. Who goes first? Not me. Silent. Me, said Tom at last. He put his foot down on the first step, and it sank into the earth. He took another step, then another. Suddenly he was gone. The others followed. They went down the steps in single file, with each step down the dark and got darker, and each step down the silence grew more silent, and with each step down the night became deep as a well and very black indeed. With each step down into the shadows waited and seemed lean from walls. With each step down, strange things seemed to smile at them. The long cave which waited below. Bats seemed to be hanging clustered over their heads, squeaking so high you could not hear them. Only dogs might hear, have hysterics, jump out of their skins and run off. With each step down the town got farther away in the earth, and all the nice people of the earth, even the graveyard above, seemed far away. They felt lonely. They felt so alone they wanted to cry. For each step down was a billion miles, lost from life and warm beds and good candlelight and mother's voices and father's pipe smoke, and clearing his voice in the night, which made you feel good knowing he was somewhere in the dark, alive and turning his sleep, and able to hit anything with his fists if it had to be hit. Each step down, at last the bottom of the stairs. They peered into the long cave, the long hall. All the people there, very quiet. They had been quiet for some time. Some of them had been quiet for 30 years. Some of them had been silent for 40 years. Some had been completely mum for 70 years. There they are, said Tom. Mummies? Someone whispered. Long line of them standing against the wall. 50 mummies standing against the right wall. 50 mummies standing against the left wall. And 4 mummies wasting the far into the dark. 104 dry as dust mummies, more alone more alone than they might have ever felt in their life, abandoned here, left below, far from dog barks and fireflies and sweet singing of men and guitars in the night. Boy, said Tom, all those poor people. Heard of them? What? Your folks couldn't pay the rent on their graves. The gravedigger dug up these people and put them down here. The earth is so dry it makes mummies out of them. Look, see how they're dressed? The boys looked and saw some of the ancient people were dressed like farmers, and some like peasant maids, and some like businessmen in old dark suits. One even like a bullfighter in his dusty suit of lights. But inside their suits they were all thin bones and skin and spider web and dust that shook down through their ribs if you sneezed and trembled. What's that? What's what? Psst. Everyone listened. They peered into the long vault. All the mummies looked back with empty eyes. All the mummies waited with empty hands. Someone was weeping at the far end of the dark hall. Came the crying. The small voice wept. Why, that's Pip. I've only heard him cry once. That's him, Pipkin. He's trapped there in the catacomb. The boys stared. They saw, 100 feet away, crouched in a corner, trapped in the most distant part of the catacomb, a small figure that moved. The shoulders twitched, The head was bent and covered with trembling hands, and behind the hands the mouth wailed as though it was afraid. Pipkin? The crying stopped. Is that you? Whispered Tom. A long pause, a trembled, insuck breath. Then, yes. Pip, for cry, what are you doing there? I don't know. Come out. I can't. I'm afraid. But Pip, if you stay there... Tom paused. Pip, he thought, if you stay forever. You stay with all the silence and the lonely ones. You stand in the long line and tourists come to look at you and buy tickets to look at you some more. You... Pip, said Ralph behind his mask, you've got to come out. I can't. They won't let me. They? But they knew he meant the long line of mummies. In order to get out, he would have to run the gauntlet between the nightmares, the mysteries, the dreadful ones, the dyers, and the haunts. They can't stop you, Pip. Yes, they can. Can, said echoes deep in the catacomb. I'm afraid to come out. Here, said Ralph. Afraid to go in, everyone thought. Maybe, if we choose one brave one, Tom said, and stopped. For Pipkin was crying again, the mummies waiting, and the night so dark and the long tomb that you could sink right through the floor if you stepped in it, and never move again. The floor would seize your ankles with bony marble and hold you until the freezing cold froze you to a dry dust statue forever. Maybe if we went in as a mob, all of us, said Ralph, and they tried to move. Like a big spider with many legs, the boys tried to cram through the door, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 1 step forward, 2 steps back. Wept Pipkin. At which sound they all fell upon themselves, gibbering and scrambling and yelling their dyers and frights back to the door. They heard an avalanche of heartbeats pang in their chests. My God, what are we going to do? Afraid to come. Him afraid to come, us afraid to go? What? What? Behind them, leaning against the wall, was Moundshroud, forgotten. Little candle flame of smile flickered and went out among his teeth. Here, boys. Save him with this. Moundshroud reached into his dark cloak, brought forth a familiar white sugar candy skull, across the brow of which was written, Pipkin. Save Pipkin, lads. Strike a bargain. With who? With me and others unnamed. Here, break this skull into 8 delicious bits. Boys, hand them around. P for you, Tom. I for you, Ralph. Half of the other P for you, Hank. The other half for you, JJ. Some of the K for you, boy. Some for you. Here's the I and the final N. Touch the sweet bits, lad. Listen, here's the dark deal. Do you truly want Pipkin to live? Such a fury of protest burst forth at this, Moundshroud was fair driven back by it. The boys barked like dogs against his, so much as questioning their need for Pip's survival. There, hurried them. I see you mean it. Well then, will you each give 1 year from the end of your life, boys? What? Said Tom. I mean it, boys. 1 year. 1 precious year from the far-burned candle end of your life. With 1 year apiece, you can ransom dead Pipkin. Year. The whisper, the murmur, the appalling sum of it ran among them. It was hard to grasp. Year so far away was no year at all. Boys of 11 or 12 cannot guess men of 70. Year? A year? Sure, why not? Yes. Think, boys, think. This is no idle bargain struck with nothing. I mean it. It is true, in fact. It is a grave condition you make, and a grave bargain you strike. 1 year each of you must promise to give. You won't miss the year now, of course, for you are very young. But I see by touching your minds you cannot even guess the final situation. Only later, 50 years from this night, or 60 years from this dawn, when you are running low on time and dearly wish for an extra day or so of fine weather and much joy. Then's when Mr. D for Doom or Mr. B for Bones will show up with his bill to be paid. Or perhaps I will come, old Moundshroud himself, a friend to lads, and say, deliver. So a year promised must be a year given over. I'll say give, and you must give. What will it mean to each of you? It will mean that those of you who might have lived to be 71 must die at 70. Some of you who might have lived to be 86 must cough up your ghost at 85. That is a great age. A year more or less doesn't sound like much. But the time comes, boys, you may regret. But we'll be able to say this. This year, I spent well. I gave for Pip. I made a loan of life for sweet Pipkin, the fairest apple that almost ever fell too early off the harvest tree. Some of you must at 49 cross off life at 48. Some at 55 must lay them down to forever sleep at 54. Do you catch the whole thing intact now, boys? Do you add the figures? Is the arithmetic plain? A year. Who will bid 365 entire days from out of his own soul to get old Pipkin back? Think, boys. Silence. Then speak. There was a long, brooding silence of arithmetic students doing inward sums, and the sums were vast indeed. There was no question, though. They knew the years from now they might doubt this dreadful haste. Yet what else could they do? Only swim out from shore to save the drowning boy before he sank the last time into the frightening dust? Me, said Tom. I'll give a year. And me, said Ralph. I'm in, said Henry Hank. And me, said all the rest. Do you know what you pledge, boys? Do love Pipkin, then. Yes, yes, so be it, boys. Chew and eat, lads. And chew. They popped the sweet bits of candy skull in their mouths. They chewed and they ate. Swallow darkness, boys. Give up your year. They swallowed hard, so hard that their eyes shone bright and their ears banged and their heads and their hearts beat. They felt something like a cage of birds let out of their chest and bodies flying off invisible. They saw but did not see the years they gave as gifts swing off around the world to settle somewhere in the good payment for strange debts. Then they heard a yell. Here, and then I, and then come! Bang, 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 3 words and 3 sounds of shoes hitting stone, and along the hall and between the rows of mummies, which leaned out to stop but did not stop, between the silent shrieks and screams, hell-bent, rushing, bracing, flinging his feet, pumping his elbows, puffing his cheeks, shutting his eyes and snorting his nostrils, and bang, bang, banging the floor with his up and down feet, came Pipkin. Oh, how he ran. Look at him come! Come on, Pip! Pip, you're halfway! Look at him race! Said everyone with sugar candy in their mouths, with the honorable name of Pipkin locked in their sweet teeth, with his savior in their jaws and his fine name on their tongues. Pip, Pip, Pipkin. Don't stop now, Pip! Don't look back! Don't fall down! Here he comes, 3/4 of the way! Pipkin ran the gauntlet. He was good and fine and fast and true. Between 100 waiting mummies he ran without touching and did not look back, and won the race. Pip, you did it! You're safe! But Pip kept running, not only through the gauntlet of dead ones, but the gauntlet of warm, sweating, alive, yelling boys. He plowed them aside and raced upstairs, gone. Pip, it's all right, you can come back! And they ran up the stairs after. Where's he going, Mr. Moundshroud? Well, I should imagine, scared as he is, said Moundshroud. Home. Is Pipkin saved? Let's go, boys. Let's see. Up! He spun like a whirlwind, his arms flung out, cut the air in slicing grabs and swoops. So fast he spun that it made the vacuum in the self-made storm. His cyclone, his huge upsuck of air, then seized the boys by ear, nose, elbow, and toe. Like so many leaves stripped from a tree, they yelled themselves into the sky. Moundshroud, raving, sank up, and they, if that is at all possible, sank and plummeted after. They hit the clouds like an explosion of gunshot. They followed Moundshroud like a flock of north-rushing birds, heading home before the season. The earth seemed to give a turn from north to south. 1,000 small villages and towns spun under, alight with candles and tomb yards through all of Mexico, alight with candles flickering in pumpkins north of the border across Texas, and then Oklahoma, Kansas, and Iowa, and at last Illinois, and at last home! Cried Tom. There's the courthouse! There's my house! There's the Halloween tree! They swooped once around the courthouse and twice around the 1,000 pumpkin burning tree, and a final time around the old Moundshroud, the around Moundshroud's tall house with its many gables, many rooms, many gaping windows, high lightning rods, railings, attics, scrollworks, which leaned and groaned in the wind as their passage made. Dust sifted out of the windows to greet them. Shades flapped in yet another windows like ancient tongues, lolling to be diagnosed by wind-born small doctors of strange medicines. Ghosts withered like white flowers, furling and unfurling in moldered flags which fell to ruin even as they shot by. And the whole house circled, was like all of Halloween ever. So cried Moundshroud, flapping his antique arms and webs and black silks as he landed on the roof and beckoned the boys to alight and pointed down through an immense sky window through all the levels of his mansion. The boys gathered around the skylight window and stared down a stairwell, which opened out of various floors to multiple times in histories of men and skeletons and dreadful musics played on flute bones. There it is, boys. Will you look? Do you see? There's our whole 1,000-year flight. There's our whole trip in one place. From caveman to Egyptian to Roman front porch to English harvest field to boneyard in Mexico. Moundshroud lifted the vast pane of glass. The stairway banister, boys. Ride it down, each to his own time, his own age, his own level. Leap off where your costume fits, where you think you and your disguise, your mask belong. Get! The boys leapt. They sprang down the stairwell at the top of the landing. Then one by one they popped onto the banister and slid yelling down through all the floors, all the levels, all the ages of history kept within Moundshroud's incredible mansion. Round and down they whisked. They skidded and snuffled on the waxed rail. What-thump! JJ in his 8-man costume landed in the basement. He glanced about. He saw cave paintings, dim smokes and fires, and shadows of hulking gorilla men. Saber-tooths burned their eyes from him at the cinder dark. Down around Rush went Ralph, the Egyptian mummied boy, bandaged for all ages, to land on the first floor, where Egyptian hieroglyphs strutted in armies of symbol with squadrons of ancient birds. In skies and flocks of beast gods and scuttling golden beetles, rolling dung balls down history. Crash hackles Nibley with his scythe, somehow still flashing in his hands, hit and almost rolled himself into mincemeat on the second floor, where the shadow of Samhain, druid god of death, raised up his scythe upon the far chamber wall. Bang! George Smith, a Greek ghost, a Roman haunt, landed on the third floor near tar-painted porches, which glued old wandering spirits to the sill. Thud! Henry Hank the Witch dropped down on the fourth landing amid witches leaping bonfires in English, French, and German countrysides. Red fire, the fifth floor took him in a heap, the beggar landing among the sounds of begging, the country roads of Ireland starving. Wally Bob, Wally Bob, the gargoyle himself, flew and crashed on the sixth floor, where gargoyles and walls sprouted elbows and limbs and lumps, grimaces of fine gargoyle humors and glees. And finally, Skeleton Tom skidded off the banister on the topmost floor to tumble and knock white candy skulls like 10-pins in a dire flang among the shadows of crouched women by mounds and miniature skeleton brass bands playing mosquito tunes, while Moundshroud, far above, still on the roof, yelled down. Well, boys, do you see? It's all one, yes? Yes, someone murmured. Always the same, but different, eh? Every age, every time. Day was always over, night was always coming, and aren't you always afraid, ape-man there, or you, mummy, that the sun will never rise again? Yes, more of them whispered. He looked up through the levels of the great house and saw every age, every story, and all the men in history staring around as the sun rose and set. Ape men trembled, Egyptians cried laments, Greeks and Romans paraded their dead, summer fell dead, winter put in its grave. A billion voices wept, the wind of time shook the vast house, the windows rattled and broke like men's eyes into crystal tears. Then, with cries of delight, 10,000 million times, a million men welcomed back bright summer suns, which rose to burn each window with fire. Do you see, lads? Think! People vanished forever. They died. Oh Lord, they died, but came back in dreams. Those dreams were called ghosts, and frightened men in every age. A billion voices cried from attics to basements. Shadows climbed walls like old films rerun in ancient theaters. Puffs of smoke lingered at doors with sad eyes and gibbering mouths. Night and day, summer and winter, boys. Seed time and harvest, life and death. That's what Halloween is. Rolled up into one. Noon and midnight, being born, boys, rolling over, playing dead like dogs, lads, then getting up again, barking and racing through thousands of years of death, each day and each night. Halloween, boys, every night, every single night, dark and fearful until at last you made it and hid in cities and towns, and some rest and had some rest and could catch your breath. You began to live longer and have more time and space out the deaths and put away fear and at last have only special days in each year where you thought of night and dawn and spring and autumn and being born and being dead. And it all adds up. 4,000 years ago, 100 years ago, this year, one place or another, but the celebration's all the same. The Feast of Samhain, the time of the dead ones, All Souls, All Saints, the Day of the Dead, El Dia de Muerta, All Hallows, Halloween. The boys sent their frail voices up through the levels of time, from all the countries and all the ages, naming the holidays which were the same. Good lads, good. Far off, the town clock struck 11:15. Almost midnight, boys. Halloween's almost over. But, cried Tom, what about Pipkin? We followed him through history, burying him, digging him up, walking him in parades, crying him in wakes. Is or isn't he alive? Yeah, did we save him? Did you indeed? Moundshroud stared. They stared with him, across the ravine to the building where lights were going out. That's his hospital, boys. But check his house. The final knock of the night. The last grand trick or treat. Go ask for final answers. Mr. Marley, see them out. The front door flew wide. Bang! The Marley knocker on the door gaped its bandaged jaw and whistled them farewell as the boys slid down the banisters and raced for the door. They were stopped by a final shout from Moundshroud. Boys! Well, which was it tonight with me? Trick or treat? The boys took a vast breath, held it, and bursted out. Mr. Moundshroud? Both! Rap went the Marley knocker, slam went the door, and the boys were gone running down through the ravine and up along the street, gasping hot gusts of air, their masks falling to be trampled until at last they stopped on Pipkin's sidewalk and looked at the far hospital, back to Pipkin's front door. You go, Tom. You, said Ralph. And Tom slowly edged up to the house and put his foot on the front step, and then the second step up, and approached the door. Afraid to knock, afraid to find the final answer about dear old Pipkin. Pipkin dead? Pipkin in a last funeral? Pipkin gone forever? No. He tapped on the door. The boys waited on the sidewalk. The door opened and Tom went in. There was a long moment of the boys on the sidewalk standing cold and letting the wind freeze their most awful thoughts. Well, they yelled silently at the house. The door shut. The dark windows. Well, what? Then at last the door opened again, and Tom came out and stood on the front porch not knowing where he was. And then Tom looked up and saw his friends waiting for him 1,000,000 miles off. Tom leapt off the porch, yelling, "Oh gosh, oh gosh, oh gosh!" He ran along the sidewalk, shrieking, "He's okay! He's all right! He's okay! Pipkin's in the hospital, took his appendix out at 9 tonight. Just got it in time. Doctor says he's great. Pipkin? Hospital? Great?" The air jumped out as each had been punched in the stomach, and the air went in and again in a great rave, a yell, a ragged shout of triumph. Pipkin, oh Pipkin. The boys stood on Pipkin's lawn in the sidewalk and in front of in front of Pipkin's porch and house, and looked with numb curiosity at each other as their smiles spread and their cheeks watered, and they yelled and the happy tears ran down their cheeks. "Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy," said Tom, exhausted and weeping from happiness. "You can say that again," they said, and they all said it again. They all stood there and had a fine happy cry. Since the whole night was turning soupy with tears, Tom looked around and revved them up. "Look at Pipkin's house. Don't it look awful? Tell you what we do." They ran at each came back carrying a lit pumpkin and lined them up on Pipkin's porch rail, where they all smiled outrageous smiles to wait for Pipkin. And they stood on the lawn and looked at the lovely sight of it all. Those smiles, their costumes tattered upon their arms and shoulders and legs, and grease paint dripped and running on their faces, and great wondrous happy tiredness gathering in their eyelids and arms and feet, but not wanting to go yet. And the town clock struck midnight, clung, and clinging again to a full count of 12, and Halloween was over. And all about the town, doors were slamming and lights were going out. The boys began to drift, saying night and night, and again night, and some good night, mostly night, yes, night. The lawn was empty, but Pipkin's porch was full of candle illumination and warmth, baked pumpkin smell. And ghost and mummy and skeleton and witch and all the rest were back at their own homes, on their own porches, and each turned to look out at the town and remember this special night that would never in all of their lives ever forget that they looked out across the town at one another's porches. Let me restart that sentence. And each turned to look at the town and remember this special night that they would never in all their lives ever forget. And they looked across the town at one another's porches, but especially on top and over and across the ravine to the great house where at the very top Mr. Moundshroud stood on his spiked railing roof. The boys waved, each from his own porch. The smoke curling out of the high mound-shrouded Gothic chimney fluttered, motioned, waved back. And still more doors were slamming to lock all around town, and with each slam, one more pumpkin, and then another, and another, and another on the huge Halloween trees snuffed out. By the dozens, by the hundreds, by the thousands, doors banged, pumpkins went blind, snuffed candles smoked delicious smokes. The witch hesitated, went in and shut the door. A witch-faced pumpkin on the tree went dark. The mummy stepped into his house and shut his door. A pumpkin with the face of a mummy extinguished its light. Finally, the last boy in all the town, remaining alone on his veranda, Tom Skelton, in his bones skull, hating to go in, wanting to wring the last drop from his favorite holiday in all the year, sent his thoughts on the night air towards the strange house beyond the ravine. "Mr. Moundshroud, who are you?" And Mr. Moundshroud, way up there on the roof, sent his thoughts back. "I think you know, boy. I think you know." "Will we ever meet again, Mr. Moundshroud?" "Many years from now, yes. I'll come for you." And a last thought from Tom. "Oh, Mr. Moundshroud, will we ever stop being afraid of nights and death?" Thought returned. "When you reach the stars, boy, yes. Live there forever. All of the fears will go, and death himself will die." Tom listened, heard, and waved quietly. Mr. Moundshroud, far off, lifted his hand. Click! Tom's front door went shut. His pumpkin like a skull on the vast tree sneezed, went dark. The wind stirred the great Halloween tree, which was now empty of all light save one pumpkin at the very top. A pumpkin with Mr. Moundshroud's eyes and face. At the top of the house, Mr. Moundshroud leaned out, took a breath, and blew. His candle and his pumpkin head on the tree fluttered and died. Miraculously, smoke curled out of his own mouth and nose, his ears, his eyes, as if his soul had been extinguished within his lungs the very moment the sweet pumpkin gave up its incensed ghost. He sank down into his house. The roof trap door closed. The wind came by. It rocked all the dark, smoking pumpkins on the vast and beautiful Halloween tree. The wind seized 1,000 dark leaves and blew them all over the sky and down onto the earth towards the sun that must surely rise. Like the town, the tree turned off its embered smiles and slept. At 2 in the morning, the wind came back. And that's it. That is The Halloween Tree by Ray Bradbury. The that last chapter always gets me. It's my favorite part. But thank you guys very much for joining me tonight. It's been a lot of fun just sharing that story with you guys. That story means a lot to me. Like I said before, it's like the Christmas Carol except for Halloween. We've been going for about 3 hours and 15 minutes. If you guys can't tell, my voice is really tired. I think I'm going to go ahead and call it there for tonight. Also, I haven't eaten dinner yet. Part of the reason we got started late is because I don't have 15 more minutes of voice. Part of the reason we got started late is because literally I didn't get a chance to eat dinner. Like, I ordered food, but it never showed up. And so I'm going to go see if it's gotten here yet. But yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and call it there. Happy Halloween, ladies and gentlemen. Sharing this has been awesome. I enjoyed it. Let me see here. Before we go, I'm going to do one thing here. Give me a second. I'm going to we're going to take a look at Twitch. We're going to see who else is streaming. Voice is very dry. I actually have turned off the sound effects for this. You know what? Because she's so awesome, we're gonna send a host to Black Dahlia. She's really awesome, guys. I generally host her when I'm done, and so she's playing Dead by Daylight. It looks like she's playing some Freddy because she loves Freddy. But yeah, so I'm gonna send a host her way. Thank you again very much, very much for coming by. It's been a lot of fun. I hope you guys have a very happy Halloween, and I will see you guys when I stream again, which will probably be. I'm busy tomorrow night, so it'll probably be Thursday. Don't forget, Saturday, 24-hour stream. We're doing the full thing, and we're doing it for charity, so that's gonna be real fun. Yeah, I will see you guys very soon. I hope you have a very, very happy Halloween.